Okay. All right, let's call this meeting to order. Thank you all for joining us here in Paulina. If you'll join me for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. The quorum is established. The board is all present and accounted for. And with that, we will move toward some, oh no, we won't. Agenda additions, deletions, and revisions. Do I have any comments or motions about the agenda?
Move to approve.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are unanimous. We will move forward. Thank you all for being here tonight. Let's start. Doug, it
Okay.
looks like you're.
So one of the cool things about growing up in the Paulina Valley, the upper country, is the Paulina Rodeo, which is the first weekend. It's Labor Day weekend every year. And it's been going on, I believe, since 1948. And every year it's become a tradition that they have some raffles and they have some shoots. And one of the things that they work towards is scholarships so that every student that attends Paulina School has a chance, has a guaranteed support of some kind when they graduate if they want to go on to a secondary education. And I think that's really, really cool. And I think it's something that maybe people don't realize when they hear about the Paulina Rodeo, and it's more than, it is a great rodeo, but it's more than just that. It's helping kids in the Paulina area prosper even after they graduate from school, whichever high school they go to. Hopefully it's Kirk County High School, but there is opportunities then for them to have support. So I believe, Harold, I don't see Mr. Keys here, so Coach Feldmeyer, good friends, go back a long ways. Thank you very much. Thank you. Hopefully we don't break the camera. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So at the beginning of every school year, at least for the last 5 years, we have an event where we bring people together across the district to set the vision, set the direction, and to just reconnect with everyone and engage in the important work that we do during the school year. And every year since I've been here, Mindy Nelson has just played a significant role in making sure that that is a beautiful event for the people of Cook County. And you can set up tables and you can put out food for people, but it's another thing to just make it incredibly welcoming, beautiful. And we could not have that kind of an event without Mindy's just creativity, and she dreams up the theme and then she puts it all together, and people just catch their breath when they come in every year because it is so nice. And so I just wanted to honor Mindy tonight and thank her. is an example of the kind of thing she makes sure. Sunday, before the Monday when we had that event, I got a text and our assistant, your assistant, my assistant, Heather was down there with Mindy, you know, on her own time, putting that together before so that she could help it be ready. And Heather always goes above and beyond, and you know, she ordered the pint glasses for our school district and had the cards made in the glass. It's just beautiful. And Heather, thank you so much for your over the top work on that opening. So that was one.
Shouldn't keep sitting down.
I was gonna say, Jason, you might as well just stay here.
And there's 3 other people that we're honoring. They're not here tonight, but Jake Huffman, come up here. You know, Jake just continually, what do you want to say, like monitors the situation. If you need chairs, he's getting chairs. If you need tables, he's getting tables. If you need T-shirts shot out into the audience, he's lobbying T-shirts, and always with positivity, complete follow through. Just such a great addition to that start of the year opening. So Jake, we just want to say thank you for making it just a little easier on the rest of us, and you're always consistently a champion. One for Nate Ditton to take
He's a
that.
cross country.
Okay, because he's always, right? Always
Yep.
doing more. And then so there's Nate Dittens, and then I'll give this other one back to the middle school. Every year, Matt Fisher writes and produces a video that's inspiring and funny. And this year, because it looked a little different, he put that all together and sent it out to all the staff. So I just wanted to honor his, the work that Matt does every year to make that a special and inspiring gift.
Yeah, thank you. All right, now we get to hear about Paulina. So Mr. Bates, will you introduce your people?
The kids will-
Looks like PTO first.
You go first. Thank you for that. Paulina is famous for many things, but at the top of the charts is their PTO. Year after year, they accomplish a lot. Back when I was a teacher here in the mid to late 90s, it was the same, just a force of nature. And so we get to recognize the 3 out of the 4 this year. And if you'll join me up front here so people can enjoy seeing you, and I'll appreciate that. And also for our board. Naomi Childers, who is also our K2 teacher, she's our president this year. Ms. Jessica Vickers, who's our vice president this year, and also a mom here at school. And then Ms. Holly Rossi, who's here. She's a mom, our secretary, and then also one of our employees here at the school. So she goes a lot of ways. And not present tonight, but our treasurer, Rihanna DeWorth. So we just want to take a moment, recognize your excellence, and do that publicly on behalf of the board. We should do that. Congratulations. All of you. Yeah.
And the
Keep going.
students.
Keep going.
Yes.
Um, Very little. But then introduce you again to Ms. Mindy Nelson, who will present the kids and give you a short description of what they'll present to you tonight. You want the video first? Let's see the video.
My name is Augustus Brown. My name is Cassie Wilson. And we are interviewing foreign school students.
Can you turn it up?
What are you looking forward to this year? Where do you want to go for a field trip? To New Zealand. Recess. We're looking forward to having new friends. What's your favorite subject in school? Yeah. Okay, where do you want to go for a field trip? What do you like about going to the school? Everything. Where do you want to go for the field trip? Okay. Do you like that the school is small? Yes. Do you like going to the school? Yes. Where do you want to go for a field trip? Do you like that the school is small? What do you like? And it has a long recess and a lot of chairs and where would you like to go for a field trip? What are you looking forward to this year? Probably the field trip. Where do you want to go for a field trip? Probably someplace that has like a hotel and a lot. Do you like going to a small school? Yes. Do you like going to small school? Good. What do you like about the school? That you have more than one recess. Where would you like to go for a field trip? What do you like about going to a small school? I would only think of not enough people. What are you looking forward to this year? I'm not sure. What are you looking forward to this year? What do you like about this school? What's your favorite activity at school? Do you like going to school? Yeah. What do you like about school? What is your favorite subject from me?
Our reporters for that is Cassie Rossi and Augustus Kavanaugh. They did a great job. That was so much fun. We wanted to include the younger kids in the presentation for you because a lot of them couldn't be here tonight. But our special guests right now, we have Ms. Cora Childers and Thomas. The best class in the world, and this is the best school in the world. So I'm super excited that they come up and share what they enjoy about going to school in Paulina.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, ladies, so those are the microphones right there. So if you just want to speak as loud as you can, that'd be great.
I'm Cora Childers.
And I'm Thomas Martin.
Paulina School has been here for decades. So many kids have been here since learning the alphabet to linear equations. The school has changed so much over the years, and we welcome more and more students every year. We welcome the Crook County School Board meeting to learn a great deal about Paulina School today.
At Paulina School, we have tablets and Chromebooks. We use them for Imagine Math, Read Live, Imagine Reading, and Storylines. Storylines are a big thing in our school. We've studied about countries where we choose individual nations. We learn things like their money, clothes, traditions, religions, major cities, and more. For 4-8 class, we designed the science room according to the country's culture. The K through 3rd class would board a makeshift plane, then visit the certain country. We have also studied the Oregon Trail. We learned the supplies pioneers have needed, parts of the wagon, animals, and different checkpoints they have reached. Other storylines we have studied are bakeries, Iditarod, safari, and pizza parlor.
Legos are a class favorite. We create battle machines to fight each other with. We also have big battles where we invite the K-3 class to watch. Usually we name our bots, and according to the features or speed, you can win other awards. These awards are made up of strongest, fastest, largest, smallest, and longest. We even make crafts out of our Legos, like make a heart contest, where we could only use a certain amount of Legos. The awards were given to the smallest, largest, most colorful, quickest built, and most complicated.
Craft fair is something we have every year in December. We decorate cookies, make bird feeders, sign ornaments, etc. We make crafts to give to our family and friends. We combined our bakery storyline and Christmas program and made cookies, chocolate-covered pretzels, chocolate Rice Krispies, and cake pops. We then used these refreshments for our guests at the Christmas program.
Our Christmas program is a privilege not every school gets to do. Last year, we wrote our program. It was called Garrett's Awesome Baking Battles. The K-3 class performed the Gingerbread Man. Mrs. Claus and Santa Claus were fighting over which show they should watch, Baking Battles or the Gingerbread Man. In the past, we have done skits, plays, Christmas songs. Afterwards, we meet Santa Claus and receive a popcorn ball and a candy.
The talent show gives us a chance to show off our amazing talents. We do things like skits, songs, dancing, and class plays. We get judged in our performances. During this time, we also pass out Valentine's cards. We make our own Valentine boxes for these cards.
Beginning in fall of 2022, preschool is something we have loved to see happen. This can help with their knowledge, friendships, and socialization. One of the highlights of the year is the Mitchell track meet. We practice hard and run a whole lot. We run a mile, high jump, long jump, discus, etc. We love getting to compete with other schools like Brothers, Seneca, and Mitchell. We have relay teams too. Last year, both girls and boys won the relay races against the other schools. Field day is also a highlight of the year. We do things like egg toss, 3-legged race, bag gun, tug of war, racing, and so much more. Afterwards, we always have a whole school water fight.
The PTO does so much for our school. Every year we have a raffle. The students get to sell tickets for this raffle. We ask families and friends if they would like to buy tickets to sponsor our school. The grand prize is a $1,000 gift certificate for Ochipka Feed, which is located in Prineville, Oregon. Last year, GI Ranch and Shotgun Ranch were generous enough to donate the money for the grand prize. There is also a dinner provided. Usually the students have jobs like serving food, someone to welcome our parents, and garbage control. The community is invited to join us for dinner and the awards. The top 3 sellers are rewarded with gift certificates, shopping, or money. The top sellers get to draw the names from the basket for the door prizes and the silent auction. Everyone that sells tickets receives a prize as well. Another successful fundraiser the PTO puts on is the annual Hunter's Bake Sale. The bake sale is during the first year season. Parents bake cookies, pies, bread, breakfast burritos, and jam. The school bakes cinnamon rolls too. The bake sale is held at the Paulina Community Hall.
The PTO pays for field trips. Some of our favorites are Wildlife Safari, Zoo, University of Oregon, Mary Hill Museum of Art, and the Columbia Gorge Discovery Museum. During COVID, the PTO would pay to have OMSI presentations over Zoom. We learned about science like elephant toothpaste and helium balloons. PTO also pays for hotel rooms and food during overnight field trips. Our PTO pays for our yearbooks too. It is so nice to look back and see all of the fun and amazing things we've done through the years.
Paulina School is so much more than a school. We know almost everyone and love helping. We spend days working together and learning new things every day. Paulina School is more than just staff and students. We are one big family.
Your presentation skills were really good, nicely done.
Yeah, that was amazing. I think that's more than I've ever heard about any of our schools. Thank you.
Yes, amazing.
So how many of you have horses? That's probably the highest. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Lisa. That's probably the highest percentage of horse owners in the country, in the schools. And I just want to say that the time I've been on the board, we have been committed to small rural schools. We believe in what they do. My mom was 80s, and I see what happens to people that come out of Paulina, how well grounded they are, how skilled they are at a lot of things, not just, you talked about things you're doing. It's not just reading, writing, and arithmetic, it's life skills. And I think that's why I really appreciate our K-8 small rural schools and what they do to develop students and to make those students successful. And so thank you. I am very, very impressed, and be nice to your horses.
Thank you, guys. Good job. Good. All right, we get to, Paulina's the first to hear from the board directly about the big honor that was bestowed on our very own Dr. Johnson this last month. The Coalition of Oregon School Administrators has declared that she is the Superintendent of the Year for Oregon. So I am going to run through some of the reasons why we believe she was awarded that prestigious award despite such stiff competition. So bear with me while I pared it down, I swear. I had so much to say. So in her 4 years as Kirk County School District Superintendent, Dr. Sarah Johnson has built an enduring foundation for success based on the philosophy that all students will learn, that all voices will be heard, and that behind every data point is a face and a name. Her passion for the success of every individual student has led to incredible growth and opportunity and improvement in our school district, despite the fact that most of her time here has been during the COVID pandemic. So I'm going to run through what some of those things have been. We got Steams Pillar Elementary opened up. It's the quest-based elementary option for the community. And we also got the Grizzly Mountain Home Link up with, what is there, 200-ish kids in that from K through mostly 10th grade now. We've got a high school program there now for the homeschoolers and a partnership now with COCC for some college credits through that as well. We've got 6 new strands of CTE programming at the high school. We have a ton of dual enrollment courses through COCC and some of the universities in Oregon, some of which were not around before Dr. Johnson's time. We've developed a tremendous summer school program during the pandemic, the last 2 summers, where about 1/3 of our enrollment has been attending. And we've had a 25% increase in participation in school activities since we started CC Connect for the middle and high schools in Kirk County. So those are huge. And the greatest statistics I think that we have to tout are our fantastic graduation rate, which put Kirk County High School in the top 1% of high schools in all of Oregon. Again, during the pandemic, which is phenomenal. And even Pioneer Alternative High School got almost 79% graduated, which is one of the highest graduation rates for alternative high schools in the state. And our special education students graduated at a rate of 88% when the state is only graduating around 66%. So we're very proud of that as well. Overall, we've had fantastic successes, and I know that a huge amount of that is due to Dr. Johnson. So please join me in congratulating her on being superintendent of students.
Couple things. It's been a couple weeks since I learned that I was selected. And so I thought a lot about the work that goes on around Cook County. And this school board gave really clear direction about what they wanted for their schools during COVID. They wanted us to be open if we could, and also to give people a chance to choose if they didn't feel comfortable being in school. So I credit a lot of what we were able to do. I mean, I look out here and I realize you do the big things. I do the little things. And the board really sets the direction for where we go. And I think that doesn't get mentioned enough, that this school board was largely responsible for our district being open and available to kids in the pandemic. So, one of the things.
And in that same vein, I was talking with Dr. Hoff today, and we now know that what we did during that pandemic was actually successful because the state has published some standardized testing scores, and we know now that our learning loss here during that pandemic was definitely less than the state saw overall. So we have a lot to celebrate about that. So, all right, that's it for celebrating. Now we get to hear from the public. We've got Ms. Holly Haynes first. Come on up. I believe you all know the drill because both of our public comments tonight have given them before, so I'm not going to run through all the details, but if there's anyone online, let me know.
I am here to express some concern about the entire body of policy for the Kirk County School District. And I'm referring to board policies, ARs, parent-student handbooks, school rules, classroom rules, forms, agreements, and contracts that students and parents are required to sign. You have board policies that conflict with one another, board policies that list statutory authority at the bottom of the policy but don't comply with that policy. Board policies that in the body of the policy list statutory authority but doesn't even exist any longer, and then in fact didn't exist when you readopted the policy the last time. The CCHS parent-student handbook conflicts with board policy, and that 2022-2023 handbook, which wasn't even uploaded to the high school website until I asked the superintendent's office about it, states that the rules within it can be changed at any time and with no notice to anyone. The handbook also refers to the term, quote, change of placement, which when used with non-IEP and non-504 students and does not follow notification and hearing requirements laid out in statute would result in illegal expulsion, I believe. You have class rules that violate board policy and state statute. You have forms, agreements, and contracts that violate board policy and potentially state statute. You revise board policies, but there's no reference to whether the ARs were analyzed to determine their continued compliance with state law or that underlying board policy. Finally, you have board policies that just simply end mid-sentence. You seem to have everyone creating policies and rules, and I understand the superintendent is able to delegate that authority to others within the district, but those policies and rules are still required to comply with the law, and they do need to be created by someone who understands what the legal requirements actually are. I alerted the board in June about a specific conflict in policy, and you apparently passed this off to a committee to evaluate, but you put in charge of that committee an administrator whose decision about that very policy you recently overturned. If the superintendent is delegating rulemaking to other employees in the district, those employees at least need to be able to discern if they're complying with the law or if they're creating a liability for the district. You have employees at 3 different levels of administration who approved an action against a student that resulted in, may I continue?
which is, let's try to let you finish up.
They result in something bad. The 3 levels of administration could not recognize or refuse to recognize the so-called policy they were enforcing didn't actually exist and also violated the law. And if that's the case, why is the office of the superintendent allowing these people to continue to make rules or administer policy? The office of the superintendent is responsible for disseminating information, and in August of 2021, before school even started last year, a law went into effect essentially making mandatory reporters of all district employees regarding bullying if the board didn't even take up this policy until its November 8th board meeting. The minutes show various administrators were present, but I do have to ask, when and in what manner did the office of the superintendent give notice and training on this new law to all district employees? A week or so ago, I noticed a cell phone policy on the district website. That policy referenced board policies and also made claims about those board policies that simply were not true. I notified the office of the superintendent, asked that the policy be removed until it was either corrected or presented as a prospective AR. Approximately 12 hours later, up pops on the CCSD website a heavily revised policy that again references certain board policies and makes claims about those board policies, some of which were again not true. More concerning was the heavy-handed language at the end of the statement regarding recorded in-person communication, and that the law does not allow that. If you are going to cite the law, then you need to actually cite the law, but don't threaten people with vague language, vague reference to some legal authority. I believe the situation rises to the level of needing an AR that would require board approval because of the language now contained in this handbook and the fact that it now doesn't comply with the parent-student handbook. In conclusion, because of what happened last year, it greatly concerns me the office of the superintendent is attempting to bypass the authority of the board by implementing rules that fall outside the board's intent regarding rulemaking on, quote, routine matters, and should instead be presented to the board as ARs so we all know what the rules are and how they came about. It is extremely concerning that rulemaking is being delegated to CCSD employees who have demonstrated they're not qualified to evaluate whether the rules they're creating or attempting to enforce are actually legal. For all of these reasons, and I will wrap up in a second. For all these reasons, I'm asking the board to engage outside legal counsel other than High Desert ESD to evaluate the entire body of policy. I'm also asking the board to suspend non-AR rulemaking and changes to handbooks until that evaluation is complete, and then to establish a formal process and oversight for all non-AR rulemaking and handbook edits by all CCSD staff to determine compliance with statute and policy, because both are dynamic. And because of the origins of the so-called policy that was the subject of an executive session are still a mystery, I'm also asking the board to direct that legal counsel to perform a thorough analysis of all disciplinary actions, formal and informal, legal and otherwise, going back however far it takes to determine compliance with state law, including but not limited to parental notification, expulsion hearing waivers, and whether that detailed data was reported to ODE as mandated by law. The policy adoptions you are considering tonight, in fact, have problems with them. But if you're not rubber stamping policies and you are thoroughly researching what you're about to vote on, you'll know what I'm talking about. The interscholastic activities policy is interesting, as it threatens students with having to pay fines levied by the OSAA if they do something bad at a football game, just as an example. That policy also threatens expulsion, which is interesting. I notice you don't threaten parents or spectators with the same fine, so I am waiting to see how you intend to enforce that. And I would like to know, has anyone evaluated the legality of that? I am glad that the interscholastic activities policy actually differentiates between classes, for credit graded classes, and activities. And finally, here's some completely unsolicited advice for whoever in the room most needs to hear this. When someone feels backed into a corner, they start making bad decisions, they start making bad policies, they desperately try to control the narrative and their public image by deleting Facebook posts and YouTube videos that make them look bad. Removing board meeting videos and causing the public to jump through hoops to access information does not serve to meet the district's goal of transparency. It only serves to make the district look sneaky and dishonest. If that's what the district is after, mission accomplished. I asked for a board video back on September 27th. I'm still waiting perhaps the office of the superintendent is trying to figure out how to email 3-hour-long videos, considering the data limitations of email accounts. So I'm happy to answer questions if you have any. If you don't, thank you very much for your time, and I will wait to hear a response by email.
Jack, your turn. Brandenburg.
Since we don't have any, I guess these are the speakers today. So I'd just like to address an issue that I observed last week with the Benla Pine School District. Finally, bringing to culmination the firing of 3 teachers. I listened to one of them, Coach Schultz, make a very impassioned presentation before the school board. And I would hope that our administration, if they haven't already, would reach out to that teacher and offer him a job. With regards to the rest of what I have to say, this is pretty much how I feel like the school board has paid attention to concerns the parents have brought to them. And there's an election coming up next year, not in November, for positions on the school board. And I would encourage citizens of Cook County, parents of Cook County students, to run for school board positions that are open, that they're able to by their position in the district. And I would ask some questions of those individuals. 1, what are the specific issues you believe your district needs to address? 2, how do you feel about books containing obscenity in our schools? 3, what do you think about schools collecting data through surveys and questionnaires on students? Do you believe schools should be able to hide gender identity issues from parents? 5, what are your thoughts on inclusive bathrooms and locker rooms? 6, do you support zero tolerance or restorative practice disciplinary policies? 7, comprehensive sex education is a curriculum in K through 12. In its current form, do you feel it's appropriate? 8, do you believe GSA clubs are appropriate for K through 12 schools? 9, how do you propose we raise the standards on academics and or reverse the declining trend in our schools today? 10, parents cannot view many third-party resources because of proprietary laws. Do you support the use of resources that parents do not have full access to? 10 simple questions that we should be asking the candidates running for school board.
Thank you, Jack. All right. That concludes public comments, and we are up to the HDESD update and discussion. Anything to share?
I don't have anything to share. September was a short meeting. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer those individually or tonight.
Okay. We've got the consent agenda. Any motion or comment there?
Madam Chairman, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. And we will move forward with the superintendent updates, starting with Anna Logan with the non-represented salary and benefits recommendations.
Proposal in the packet to make changes to non-represented salary scales and benefits for the current year. If you want me to know that the step increase criteria are more stringent for non-represented staff. So the board approval authorizes the step for employees to continue. The proposed changes to the salary and health insurance benefits align with the salary certified company. And the cost impact of the changes are within the affordable range within.
I need to recognize that I have potential conflict of interest, and I will be abstaining from the vote. I also have a potential conflict of interest and will be abstaining from the vote. Any other discussion?
Potential or actual?
I honestly don't know.
Potential, because all the decisions are being made for the class, not for individual employees.
Any discussion there? All right. Any motions?
Madam Chairman, I move to adopt the changes to benefits in the 22-23 salary scales for supervisory and confidential employees as presented.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes with the 3 voting. And we will move to CCSD Family Engagement and Communication with Jason Carr.
I guess I could say good afternoon, since it's not evening yet. Madam Chair and members of the board, wanted to give you sort of an update today about our family engagement and communication efforts, especially now that we are into a normal school year for the first time in 2.5 years. But it was really fun to see what happened the first 2 days of school. Obviously, I think everybody was celebrating the fact that students and staff did not have to wear masks, and all the regular activities and assemblies and all of those activities were back in full swing. One of the things that we have talked about at the district level that I know has been important to you as a board has been to return to a lot of our regular family engagement opportunities, but also finding ways that each of the buildings and us as a district can continue to engage with families. So I just want to kind of go through some of those topics that we're going to talk about. Parent-teacher committees, school level family events, and some of the listening sessions, which Dr. Hoff will talk more about. Updates that we have made to all of our websites to improve not only the information that's on there, but also just the structure of it, how, for example, it appears on a phone, some of our social media strategies, and then the launching of some new newsletters that we are working on this year. So parent committees, we really have not had the PTOs or the PTCs, as some call them, parent teacher committees, as involved the last couple of years just because of COVID. So it's been great to see that all of our elementary schools, and of course you heard what's happening here in Paulina, those are all very active. And in fact, Steen's Pillar Elementary School has a new parent committee that has just launched this year. I've been working with them on they've just Facebook pages and things of that nature. So they're kind of in that process of getting things set up, but they want to work on fundraisers and events just like a lot of the other parent committees are doing. For example, the Halloween events that are occurring at the elementary schools are events that are put on by the PTOs as a way not only to bring families and students together into the buildings, but also as fundraising events. Mustang Milers program, which culminates with the fun run at the end of the year, that's another type of activity that those organizations work on. So it's really good to see those occurring especially at the elementary level. Our school level family events, these are just a few of the things that we've had going on since the first of the year. So open houses, obviously we haven't had those at the same level that we have the last couple of years. The 6th graders just had a 6th grade social, which is just a way for the 6th grade classes, since they're in different houses, to have time to be together and get to know one another. The high school hosted a senior FAFSA night to help parents learn about federal aid and other help with attending college. Principal Taylor Troutman has started what she calls Donuts with Grown-ups, which is just essentially parents, family members, community members come in early in the morning, starting around 7. There's free coffee and donuts, and it's just a chance to mingle with parents and the administration and get to know each other more. Happening tonight is the culture night for our Hispanic families at Barnesville Elementary. So a lot of our staff are there tonight with those families. Virtue Awards. So the last couple of years, I have been reporting the Virtue Awards in the building. Crooked River has chosen to stay with that. The Barnes Butte had a full school assembly, the first one they've had in 2.5 years, bringing the parents in and actually having them there present when they hand out the Virtue Awards to the kids K through 5. A lot of the all-school assemblies have come back. And again, I mentioned Halloween parties. And then also just encouraging volunteers. The principals have done a really good job of communicating with families that, hey, we want you in our buildings. We want you to volunteer. We need your help. In fact, at Crooked River, just as a way to identify and also for a safety reason, I know Principal Kimberly Bonner has instituted now that all volunteers wear, I can't remember if it's yellow or orange, but a lanyard that's of a certain color. So that way both students and staff know that those are volunteers in the building, and it kind of calls out that we have special guests in the building. So you're going to see more of these types of events build this year, and really try to maintain that level of in-person communication and opportunities that we've missed out on the last couple of years. I'm not going to go into the SIA listening sessions too much. Dr. Hoff will talk about that, but these are some really focused groups, and those meetings will start in November. A couple of communication strategies that we are really focusing on this year is bringing back, for example, our fireside chats, which we had during the COVID time period, which really proved to be a great communication tool with the what seemed to be never-ending rule changes and all the things that we had to deal with, and just getting the word out to parents of what was going on, and also allowing them to ask questions and have their concerns addressed. We don't feel like we're in a need to do that every single week like we did during COVID. So the second Thursday of each month, so this Thursday, we will launch the first fireside chat, and we're really going to kind of focus on topic areas. So we're going to bring in Officer Jeff Kaufman, our school resource officer, to talk about school safety. Rob Bonner will talk about athletics, and there's a couple other just back to school basic info tidbits that Dr. Hoff and Dr. John will be. 4 p.m. is when that'll be, and that'll end up on Facebook and YouTube, and then it'll be there for parents to look at.
We're gonna have the puppets.
They've talked about that. I think Dr. Johnson is more excited about that than
Rightfully so.
yeah. The CCSD journal that you see up here. So I have launched using a new platform called S'more. And one of the reasons why I looked into this as a newsletter platform is not only the ease of use, but the way that it looks on a phone. It's very interactive, and it's really easy to read. You can see photos, you can add YouTube links, other links for parents to go to. What we know is that over 80% of parents, and really the general population, tends to look at everything on their cell phone. And so having a way for that to be easily read is really, really important. And so we've launched a newsletter for the district that will go out once a month. I'm helping to develop on the same platform newsletters at Crooked River, which one has gone out, the middle school, the high school. Just sent one out for Mr. Bates' Esteems Pillar on Friday. And so Barnes Butte will be the next school that I will work with. And I think, Dr. Hoff, if you click on, let's see, if you click on the CCS, is that a link? Okay, I was going to bring that up. So one of the cool things too is that we can actually embed the newsletter on the website. So when somebody goes to look at our website or one of the school's website, the newsletter is embedded right there. And again, it's really easy to use. One of the things you can't see on there, because I'm not logged into it, is that there's an analytics segment of it that tells me every time somebody opens it, it'll actually change live. And so I can tell you that our high school newsletter had over 2,000 views. The district newsletter, I think, is close to 4,000. It also tells you like how many minutes that each individual person spend on that newsletter. I was really surprised to see that we had really hundreds of people, both on the district's newsletter and the high school's newsletter, spend more than 10 minutes, which tells you that they're actually reading the articles, they're clicking on links. And so what's really great about that is it's showing the value of these newsletters already. The other thing that I can do and will do is these can be made public. So somebody from the general public, a grandparent, aunt, uncle, just somebody in the community that wants to know what's going on in our schools and have access to these newsletters can sign up and they would receive them as well. Hashtag days. This is really something that I developed in order to really kind of focus on a lot of the things that we want to connect to with the big 5 priorities, especially student voices and faces, really connecting the general community and our families with who are the students in our building, who are our staff members. And so really this is a way for me to kind of focus on certain areas every single day of the week. So like on Mondays, we focus on the staff. Tuesdays is a creative day, which is like your art, music, drama, career and tech ed. What's Up Wednesday is sort of like, you know, when we get, sometimes I'll hear people will send me emails, I'll see things on Facebook wondering, you know, what is that new building next to the high school? So it's just an opportunity to kind of throw out little tidbits to folks about what's going on that maybe they see, or maybe even some things internally that they don't see. Culture Thursday is really about the culture building that we're doing in the schools, what things our students and staff are doing. And then Amazing Students Friday, just highlighting a student in each of the schools that the staff really feel like have gone above and beyond and deserve some recognition. And then lastly, on the websites, Joel, if you want to go to like just the main district website, what we really tried to do is update all the websites. We've updated on the back end a new platform, which you don't see, but that really helps us to run these websites much better. All of them are designed with the news slider on the front, and then on the right-hand side, now we have a running calendar. Currently, I'm manually updating those. I'm working with Technology Director Eric Ryan to do a calendar integration with Events Manager, which ultimately will allow us at some point to connect with Events Manager. So then those calendar items are always live, and I won't have to go in and manually update them. So every week, the rundown of that week will be live on the district site, and then we can pare it down for each school. So events that are happening that week, whether it's a FAFSA night, a school sports event, that'll be live on the website. And again, we've got our after school club video on there. And then as Dr. Hoff scrolls down, you'll see again, the Find a Fast link. So if you go down just a little bit, Joel. So right there, these were actually boxes that we put on the main website based on feedback from our secretaries of things they were hearing that parents were continually asking, where do I find that? And so part of managing a website is always getting feedback from parents and staff members about, can they find things easily? Or is it hard to find something? What would they prefer to be up front and center? And so that's always an ongoing process, but a lot of the updates that we've made to our websites have been based on that feedback from last year. And so again, we've talked about fireside chat and the journals or the newsletter. So those are kind of the main updates that and sort of really focus areas with communications. And then the last slide, I just have kind of this interesting quote that I really like, which is that every act of communication is a miracle of translation. And ultimately, communication is never 100% perfect. It's always something that's in process. That's as much a science as it is an art. And what I really believe is hearing as much from staff and from families about what do they want to hear, what do they need to know, and how can we make it easily accessible. So what I love about it is when I hear that something's not working or there's something better that we can do, that's, I think, part of our job as a district, and my job as communications is to be able to make those improvements and those adjustments as we go along. Any questions or comments?
Questions, but I have comments. You have done a fantastic job. As a parent, I am so thrilled with the newsletters. They are so informative. I know more about what's going on in the schools and when sports start than I've ever known in 8 years that I've lived here. So hallelujah, such an improvement. I love the Meet the Staff Mondays. Those are my favorite. It's been so great to read those. I didn't even know about those different hashtags, but I've been seeing them coming up and enjoying them. Didn't realize how intentional it was. So awesome job. And the websites, the links are working. I can find what I need. You're making me very happy, Jason.
That's good to hear.
Anybody else? All right. Well done, Mr. Carter. Great.
Thank you.
And to Joel, for the SIA report. No, yeah.
You got it. Yeah, this is a required ODE report. This is the third year of the SIA, which stands for the Student Investment Account. There's 4 categories we're allowed to spend this $2.3 million on, or sorry, 2.1. Reducing class size, well-rounded education, instructional time, and health and safety. Our allocation is 2.3, around 2.3 million. The majority of that goes to staff, particularly at Steens Pillar, to reduce class size. A small portion goes to services and supplies. Breaking that down a little more granular, we use those funds in 21-22 to hire 12 elementary school teachers at Steens Pillar, 2.5 counselor positions, 30 plus connect clubs. This number has updated from in your packet. 7.13, and don't ask me how you get 0.13 instructional assistants. 1 bilingual culture teacher or special programs, half-time at-risk student support, half-time bar and dispute, mental health, behavior support. Some of this money is used for community engagement efforts. We're required to do listening sessions, which we do outside of this, but some of this money helps facilitate those. Teacher training for small group intervention and instruction. A portion of this money gets passed on to Pal Butte Community Charter. They use that for SEL curriculum and specials. Some intervention and enrichment software, as well as mental health supports and curriculum. The outcomes, we believe that this small group instruction allows for more individualized intervention. We are seeing some lack of learning loss because our teachers are doing small groups. We believe the smaller class size helps with that teacher-student connection, as well as those well-rounded education efforts keep students engaged. Our next step, we're in the current 3-year plan. We'll do some more community engagement. Based on that community engagement, we'll make some refinements, some modifications. And then the SIA is incorporated into what is called the integrated guidance. The ODE is rolling 6 grant programs into one, and that'll start this year, and you'll hear more about that probably winter, spring. Very interesting stuff. Any questions on the annual SIA report?
Joel, is that investment in the 12 teachers at Steens Pillar, is that something that's sustainable over multiple years, or is that going to end with this cycle?
So this is from the student success, speak ODU to real quick. So the legislature passed the Student Success Act, which was a corporate activity tax on large corporations in Oregon. We are told it would take an act of the legislature to remove that corporate activity tax. So the student investment account is stable up until the point the legislature still adequately staffing this classrooms.
But we can charge ongoing expenses to it. We don't have to. There was a grant a few years ago where you had to change your activities every couple of years.
No, there's no, those 4 buckets, the reduced class size, those will continue for as far into the future. Great question.
Related to that, is there a fixed allocation, or do they take the total receipts and then allocate it on a ADMW basis or something?
I smile because we will get adjusted allocations seemingly whenever they decide to email us. So that's been one of the barriers. And one thing that's been tricky is we'll get a number at the beginning of the year, and just like our master budgeter, it's always kind of budgeting and adjusting, but you could probably speak more to this than I could.
I don't know that I could do any better, but what we have found is that the only time it went down was when the pandemic hit. And there were projections that the whole economy was going to go down, and change for the worse. And when that didn't happen, then our allocation went back up, and I think that the people who are estimating the corporate activity tax are being a little bit careful. And so when you do see an adjustment, it generally goes up a little bit, like $700 or something.
Is there any kind of look back?
There's no reconciliation.
Okay.
They give us an amount, and if we don't spend it, then we don't get it, but we wouldn't do that.
So it's paid retroactively, the
Actually,
reimbursement?
This is one of the few grants where they just allow you to claim it throughout the year. And so we just claim it as we can, because generally we are spending the money and then getting reimbursed. So.
And if we get more, which has happened, they email you, hey, you got another, $700 or more than that. How we would use that is typically would be to increase the number of clubs that we're able to offer. So there is that cushion where it's all beneficial and you wouldn't leave money on the table.
Can I make another comment?
Please.
The top item on this list was the 12 teachers at Steens Pillar. And I do want to make sure that, the board probably knows this, but maybe the public doesn't, that by adding all of those teachers at Steens Pillar, it reduced class sizes in all of the in-town elementary schools. So that's why we did that, was to reduce class sizes across all the elementary schools, not just to do something at Steens Pillar. That program didn't exist. And so that's how we addressed building capacity issues at Crooked River and Barnes Butte and reduced our class sizes at the same time. Luckily, just in time for COVID, when there was limitations that we would have not been able to open.
And the miracle is we didn't know about COVID when we opened Steens Pillar.
Right.
And if we hadn't opened Steens Pillar, we could have not followed the state guidance to bring students back into school that fall. But because we had opened Steens Pillar, we could meet all of the state requirements to have in-person school.
And that's because our board is forward-looking and really good at what they do.
Mr. Smith, I think miracle was the right word there. Yeah,
it was a miracle.
Joel, on your list of activities, you have Pellevue Charter School doing SEL curriculum and specials. What
Yeah.
are specials?
That's
I never heard that.
That's
term.
their reference for
PE,
there's PE, I don't know if it's art, they're electives, more they're special electives. Just
specials is often the term they use for anything that's not the regular certified teacher in the classroom. So music, art,
Okay.
language and
Yeah.
culture.
it's kind of the elementary school word for elective.
Yeah.
How I've come to recognize it. Any other questions on the SIA report?
Then we're right back to you on
Let's
standardized
let's
tests.
keep
So
it
come
going.
in.
All right, so as you know, the state pushed up their date that they released our ELA, English Language Arts, Math, and Science OSAS scores from last spring. Starting with participation rate, because this is something, for years and years and years, you'd have about 90–95% of your students take the test. And ever since COVID, and it actually started right before COVID, you started to see some districts and some students in schools opt out. So starting here with, we're in the 80s or above for all our English Language Arts, except for high school. They're at 36% participation rate, so only about 1 in 3. The state was at 59. You can see we're kind of slightly below the state in our participation this year. All grades combined, we're at 78%. Math, again, kind of mid to low 80s. 8th grade was at 70%. Again, the high school was at about 33%, about 1 in 3. And then finally, science, you're seeing about those same numbers. I wanted to do a quick look back, and this was a presentation I gave, I want to say back in May, as we got the sense that there was a number of people opting out. So like I mentioned, so you've got beginning in 2016, we kind of hovered all our schools kind of mid to high 90s. No one took the test in 2020. That would have been May of 2020. And then this last year, 2021, the state kind of wasn't clear on whether we actually would have to give it until I think about 2 weeks before it opened up. So again, a really small percentage. And then this year, we're starting to get a little bit back to normal. So you can see our elementaries averaged 86.2%. This is on the EOA. Our middle school averaged about just over 81%. And then altogether, we're at 78%. Our high school is kind of the outlier here at 36%. So this was also, I wanted to highlight this back up. You might say, well, what is going on? Why would someone opt out of the test? So this is a slide that I shared last May, I believe, where why would a student and a family decide to participate? So why would someone opt in? Well, it gives a snapshot of student progress for the parents, teachers, and students. It gives info for those teachers to make intervention decisions for those students. It identifies our schools and district strengths and weaknesses. In the past, and we're getting back to this, some universities would accept the juniors SBAC, OSAS scores to help level decisions. So it's not universal across all colleges and university. And then another benefit is it's an additional standardized test for those that like standardized tests.
Joel, before you leave that top one, what's the lag time from the student taking the test to getting the results? Because don't we usually take it in May and kind of don't get the numbers until October, November?
That's a good question. The state kind of does it in batches, it seems like. So I've seen as quickly as a week to 2 weeks. And then there was a year ago, 2 years ago, science took 6 months. So I would say on average within a month or so.
So the individuals get their.
For the
results,
individuals,
but this-
the schools, good clarification, the schools, we get our data as, there's kind of a running count as the individual data comes in, but then we don't get our official numbers until, and first look is, I want to say in August or September. And then, you have a month to kind of look through them. And then the public release is usually about 6 weeks after that. Good question. So why would a family, why would a student want to opt out? A lot of times what we see is this is a parent's philosophical choice. These assessments do take time, and some parents have just said, I want my kid in class learning rather than taking assessments. We have heard that student test anxiety is a real thing. So that's, some parents opt their kids out, as well as there's what's called assessment overload at the junior year, where you could take up to 5 to 7 AP tests. You could be taking the SAT, you could be taking the ACT, and then this comes along at the end of May. So by at that point, the question I think some parents, some students ask, why? This data is great for us as a school district, but I think some students just say, hey, I've done these 8 other standardized assessments in the last 2 months. I don't see the value in doing that. So we have communicated to parents and administrators that just like the college choice or going straight into work or joining a trade school, that this is a student by student choice, and that we see our role as the district to inform of, hey, here's why you would take it, here's why you wouldn't. Look at the student's individual decision and have the family make that choice with the student. Anecdotally, Mr. Smith asked, well, who are these kids that opt out? We looked at some subgroup data. More and more what we're seeing, and anecdotally from the middle school and high school especially, was those students in those higher academic classes were the ones that they said were mostly opting out. So it's something we got to watch. I think this is a shift in the educational field of forever. We put a lot of stake into our assessment results, and with only 1 in 3 juniors taken at for our district and only 1 in 2 out of the state, it's something we're going to have to watch and figure out what's best for us and what's best for students. Before I move on, any questions on participation before I get into the results?
I have a comment. So after listening to your presentation, I still don't know whether you're in favor of us taking these tests or not.
Right.
I know that as a parent, I called the district last year and I asked what I should do with my kid. And based on the input I got, I felt like I could opt my kid out and there wouldn't be anything bad. I'm hearing a different story tonight. I suggest you make up your mind and be clear about what you want. Because then you might get it.
I want there's not a universal, you should take this or you shouldn't. It's a good point. It comes, and I hate to, it comes down to that student. If a student has a SAT score, an ACT score, and 6 AP scores, for me to say, oh, and we need you to take this test so that we can decide how we're doing, I don't know if that's in the best interest of a kid. So I think it is really that communication, that dialogue between the family and the student with that student's individual situation, that then we could have that conversation. But I unfortunately I wouldn't want to push either a family into either one of those. Taking it, yeah.
Scott, you used a word today when we were visiting agency.
Yeah.
And as people have, been asked by the state to do things, I think that this is something that they could exercise agency. And I think that that's had an impact on it. And I also think that it's the involved parents, the ones who are watching what's going on, who are making a choice whether this is good for their child or not. So I think there's some imbalance in kids whose parents are not engaged. I think those kids are simply getting moved into the test because it is an opt-out, not an opt-in.
I agree with that, but I would also say that if we are concerned about performance and measuring these targets we're going to hear about in a minute, about whether we're doing better or not, then systems which encourage our best performing students to opt out, which this one does, are not helping our overall goal of reaching our targets. So we probably need some intentional discussion about what's our real goal here. I mean, I agree, it does facilitate agency, and I'm happy to opt my kid out of anything that causes more stress and more work, maybe for no good. But if the good is the district is able to actually show its true performance, that's a pretty high bar that's worth doing.
I remember,
So
Scott,
I don't know which way to go.
Yeah.
I remember when I think I gave this presentation 6 months ago, we talked about all the benefits are for the district and for the parents. So I think that's where the crux of it is why would a student take this other than to give us data? So I think the point you made 6 months ago is the right point of, we have to figure out a way to make it worthwhile for the student, other than just say, hey, we want your data. You know what I mean? So it's kind of exploring that area.
So do they have the right to opt out at 8th grade?
Yeah.
But we aren't communicating the agency to the parents.
Oh, yeah, we do.
I think
So 80% of our 8th grade parents and students took the test. But by 11th grade, 3 years later, 36.8. And that was my point, is that now when I go through the rest of this data that says how well we did, which 36.8% is it? Is it the point that don't read the newsletters and don't understand how to use agency and to opt their kids out? Or is it the high end where the parents may be engaged? Right, so I was trying to figure out, is this our top students, our bottom students, or just a mishmash of everything?
Yeah, I think to answer that specific question, I think with one in three students, it would be irresponsible to draw any academic conclusions or like system program analysis. I think your initial question on 8th graders,
80%, I'm not sure you can judge from the data.
I think that sample size is solid enough. We talked today about sample size. And I think the high school sample size is not, especially because it seemed to be the kids who had too many tests, like they had finals, they had AP tests, or they had the dual enrollment tests. And I think that's where we lost testers. I think at the, when you got down to the middle school, and you got 80% of the kids testing, you probably got a decent sample size, because when you take 80% out of the bell curve, you're not doing too badly.
Yeah, but the question is it 80% out of the bell curve, or is it 80% off the top, 20% off the top? And that's what we don't know, is how did that 20% realize they didn't have to take the test? And so we're sitting here, it's real hard to say we're going to put a lot of faith in any of this data when we're in that 80%, 85% range, because we don't know who the 15% are that didn't take the test. And I think that's what I was getting to the other day was, if you've got 90, that's why the state forced us to try to get to 95, 96%, was because then you knew you had a true sample of all the data. But if you go do a survey of who's most popular and you only call the Democrats, odds are you're going to get a different answer than if you call the Republicans. And that's where I'm saying here, we don't know who we're calling, but I know that it's probably not representative of the bell curve.
Well, we talked today about your herd of cows. And we said, if you assess 80% of them, would you know how good your herd is?
Yeah. But if you let me, here's the problem. If you let me go pick you want to know what my calves weigh? Let me go pick the top 20% off the top and put them in another pen, and then you tell me what the herd of calves weighs by looking at the 80 that are left in the field.
So there have been
You're
some
gonna get right
districts
answers.
who have adopted better assessments than, I think that, Smarter Balanced has gotten better and better over the years. But, districts that have used something like MAPS, that has more diagnostic power and can drill down and offer more to the district, and then have encouraged parents to opt out. So it's not, we've always been a testing district until this last 3 years. And there were a lot of impacts. I think once people got involved in COVID, they thought a lot more about opting their kid out than they did before COVID.
What's my belief is we want to test the least amount possible to know what we need to know. Okay, and I'm not sure SBAC has ever been that way. It's a big, long, high stress test.
Yes.
I would rather see us do 4 little tests over the and learn from them and not cause stress for our students, and then get away from uniform state testing. Now, that's going to not give us the ability to hold it up against other districts.
Yeah.
But what it will do is allow us to develop our own metrics on how are our students compared to where we believe they should be.
This is another swinging of the education pendulum. When, 25 years ago, when I was first educating, they didn't use standardized assessments at all. And you've watched the political climate in the US over the last 15 years, and both Democrats and Republicans have pushed the testing onto schools, which doesn't generally help the most struggling and lowest populations. They are usually the most hurt by standardized tests.
It does seem to me it would be fairly mechanically simple to, if you use GPA as a proxy for performance, to take the 8th grade class, pull a list of all students by GPA and pull us another column for who took the test and who didn't, and then sort it by rank, and it would instantly tell you whether you took a chunk out of the bell curve or it was spread across the curve.
When we were discussing this, we did talk about that, like you could do more diagnostics to see who took it. It's just that every year when things change, do we pressure parents to take it, or do we give them the chance to opt in or out?
We've been having this discussion for 15 years.
Yeah.
16 years.
Yeah, at least since I've been on the board. And, we've talked about the value of tests. Certainly standardized testing was a big thing as part of the federal No Child Left Behind program. Now we've moved beyond that. It is still being, heavily discussed at both the federal and at the state level. I don't know where we're going to end up. I think for us, it's more important to have a clear understanding of how each child is doing than to have an understanding of how all children are doing. And this is an all assessment. And so, to the degree that we are committed to providing a quality education and getting successful outcomes for every child, pushing standardized testing doesn't get us there.
We have made tremendous progress in knowing where every student is. That has been something we made tremendous progress in the last 5 years.
Yeah. And then, that takes the time, the stress or whatever, and attaches it to value for that student. Not just take this test so we can see how we're doing compared to some random group of other students. So, as long as we're finding a way or multiple ways to understand how our students are doing and get that information fast enough so we can do something about it if they're having problems. And I think that's probably a combination of, individual unit tests and grades and so forth. Let's focus on that. We'll do the tests if we need to do the tests, but I don't see any reason to push anybody into it. And that has not always been my philosophy, but there's no value in 68% compared to the states at 54%. It's just numbers.
Well, let's hear those numbers.
In my opinion. So not
Stole my line,
to
Jessica.
tear down the rest of your presentation here, but
We will take all the 11th grade with a grain of salt. but-
Yeah, and you'll see on this, I highlighted that 11th grade, just because with 30%, I don't feel comfortable pulling any conclusions from that. But you can see, we've got in this first column, we've got our percent proficient, then we have the state's percent proficient, and then over here we have the difference. So our groups that did take the test did better than in most areas than the state's groups that took the test. So that is definitely a celebration, because it hasn't always been that way in this district. So English, greens across the board at nearly every grade level. Math, we're working hard at the middle school to get those math numbers back to where they were. And then finally, science was a struggle for us. This was a new science test that implemented, let's say this is the 3rd year, 3 messy years in education. So that'll be one of our next steps, kind of looking for more alignment with that science test.
yeah, I was going to say, because we used to do really well on the science.
Yeah, they updated the standards, the next generation science standards, I want to say 4 years ago, and then they've kind of been tweaking the tests for the last 3 years. So I think we need to catch up our alignment with what's assessed to how we teach, and kind of do a better alignment of that. Highlights. We are above the state average in the majority of grade level areas. There appears to be, even though more of the state participation was higher than ours, we appear to have less learning loss than the rest of the state. We attribute that to opening early. You'll see in English language arts, our 4th and 7th grades are 10%. That cohort is 10% above the state. Our 8th grade is 7% above the state. In math, our 4th grade is 9%, and in 5th grade, we're 7% above the state. So definitely some highlights there. We also had some of our student groups perform really well. We've got 80 English learners that took the test, and they were above the state average compared to other English language learners, as well as our African-American students. Put a quote from Mia Hamm, if you're a US soccer fan in the early 2000s, she said, "Take your victories, whatever they may be, cherish them, use them, but don't settle for them." We did better in this compared to the state than we ever have, but we don't want to settle, because we believe our overall proficiency levels remain low. We have some maths that are just hovering in the high 20s in grade levels, some 30%. So we want to celebrate the hard work that staff did to get kids caught up in the pandemic to keep moving, but we don't want to settle and say, oh, we're doing awesome, because we still have a lot of improvement to do. Like I said, in area improvement, we're struggling with the new science assessment, so to dig into that, as well as we had some achievement gaps within the Kirk County School District. So our ELLs, although they were above the state, they still were below all the other Kirk County School District students. Students with disabilities, our homeless students, our migrant students, and then our underserved race ethnicities. Next steps, we'll continue what's working. Identification and intervention for our off-track students, those are at below grade level, as assessed by, you guys mentioned, having other formative assessments that are along the way tracking progress. So we have a number of those. So we'll continue as kids score low on those to make sure they get the right intervention. Continue that small group intervention that we feel is working, as well as continue to work on our alignment with our standards, skills, and our interim assessments, our IAPs. What we're going to focus on, target reports, from the OSAS tell us what skills our students didn't do well on. So we'll look at what specific skills within that assessment we didn't do well on. As you might have heard, we're implementing a new English language arts curriculum. So get that going. The middle school is really focused on the academic procedures, systems, and interventions. Like I said, review that science assessment as well as assessment participation information. So how do we convince people what the right path is for them with this assessment? So any more questions?
I have a question about the, can you go back to the chart with the data on it? Okay, so if you look at that, you see where your students are performing in English language arts, and then you see the percentage in mathematics, and there's a big gap between the number that the percentage that are proficient in English versus math. Now, that would suggest to me that it's not kids that are the challenge here, because you're a normal kid, you're above average kid, you're below average kid, you should be hitting about the same number. That suggests it's something with the test and the way the test is aligning to the standards. Otherwise, it should be hitting approximately the same percentage in each one.
So if you look,
Wouldn't that be true?
we'll look at the state, you know, the
Right,
state
it's the same
English
pattern
is
on the
higher.
state
Yeah,
side.
so.
And
Yes.
as you're, it's close. Look at the
Yeah.
third grade. It's very
Totally.
close in both English and math in the third grade, and then
Then
that
it
gap
has it goes on.
widens as you get bigger. So that really suggests to me that the instrument or the alignment is more the problem than the students. Now, I am curious as to why, with the amount of money and the amount of effort we have poured into the math initiative, we're not getting more progress in math. Actually, students in English language arts, where we don't have an initiative going, are doing better relative to the state average than the math where we're working so hard.
Yeah.
Can you help me understand that a little
Yeah,
better?
our plan would be to do a whole, we've hired Shannon McCaw, math consultant, about 15 different things related to our math improvement. I would recommend that our November meeting come back with a full kind of focused math report, because there is some good data in there, but to your point, there's also a long way to go.
Has the focus of that math though been primarily at the elementary level, which has such?
It's a good question. I know the middle school did request this year to have more time with her. So I think we're going to where our giant, you know, you want to put your focus where your gaps are. And I think our gaps were traditionally at the elementary school. Now we're seeing some gaps at the middle school. So that's where she's putting her focus this year. But I think a more comprehensive math initiative report makes sense for November.
So a couple of months ago, I sent you a screenshot of the whiteboard shortly, it was the summer after we had hired Dr. Johnson in 2018. An interesting thing is that while we have gained against the state, we're not doing what I would call incredibly better as a percentage of students meeting the standards. Now, some will say the standards have changed. There's been all kinds of things, but we aren't doing a great job of growing that achievement. Now, 2018, we know what happened late in 19 and 20 and 21. So it hasn't been a normal cycle. But before we get too excited, we have to realize that we still have a long ways to go.
My friend Mia Hamm said, take your victories, whatever they may be, cherish
But
them,
don't settle.
but don't settle for them. So no, I would completely agree.
Just because the state's doing crap, it doesn't mean it's good for us.
Anything else? All right, Joel, you're off the hook. Dr. Johnson,
Well, here we go.
talk about transportation.
So in the morning, it was announced that I received the superintendent of the year. And that afternoon, the whole transportation department was on fire. So not literally, okay, but figuratively. Joel and I ran the rest of that day, on transportation issues, and then it just kept coming. So when you have spotty problems, you go and put out, you look at this, you look at those problems and you correct things in that area, and then, that's part of organizational improvement. And then when you have a bigger picture problem, you go and you begin to work
in a bigger picture format. And that's what we have done with the bus riding transportation. I've had a chance to talk to some of you, and I kind of joke that you take a big giant tin can and then you put 75 kids on it, and then you put a driver that's retired from another job and now they're driving bus on there. And then in the summer, you turn the heat way up, and in winter you turn it way down, and you put it out in traffic and you change all the stops, and they have to stop and drop off in other places. And then you get these kids on there and they're riding for really long amounts of time. And it can be problematic. Again, this is a systemic issue in education, transportation, but there's some things that I know work. So we pulled everybody together and said, what could we do to work on the system? And so what we're presenting to you today are some strategies that we put in place, and actually have had really good feedback today, or so far. Today, the principals, not Jim, because I don't think he was in there today. He was on Zoom, but they said, why didn't we think of this before? This is really working. We had 0 bus problems today. So I think we're seeing a little bit of glimmer. So here's the answer. We need some extra polished and experienced work with parents when they call in. So when you need polish and experience, where do you go? To Stacy Smith. So we put Stacy as a tier 2 transportation incident leader. So instead of having those tier 2 issues solved at transportation, we are engaging Stacy, who then is working on the problem and training people in the department to address those in an experienced and effective way. And then one of the things that happens is if your transportation supervisor is having to drive all the time, they don't have they don't have time to solve the problems in a timely manner. So we just have to get more people driving buses so that it frees Michelle up to work on the system issues. And she's on a bus nearly every route and definitely filling in on trips. So we have to get her back into leading that department and not driving and leading at the same time. One of the things we discovered when we went through the problem-solving process was that our school offices are closed before those kids are getting off the bus. So when parents follow the route of getting a hold of their school to address an issue, there's no one there. It gets transferred out to transportation, which is frustrating in itself. And then, the people at transportation, they don't know their family, they don't know the kid. So then you're trying to round up people back at the school to help solve the problem. It was not structured in a way that would work well. So we didn't hire more people because people are just not available, but we extended the hours of some of the people and shifted the schedule of some of the people so that parents have access to their school later in the day. So that's one of the answers.
How late?
We can pretty much be, it's 4:30. We can pretty much be sure that they're gonna get a good response and good customer service if we can keep somebody on those phones until 3:30. I'm sorry, 4:30, yes. So then I went back to my experience as an elementary principal and pulled out what I did. And that was, I had every student in my school was bused in, so I had great experience with buses. And you have to connect the behavior on the bus to the behavior at school. And so I've asked the principals to, or an assistant principal to board a bus every day when you step up on the bus, how'd the ride go? And then if there's a problem on that bus, we give them a little bus ticket. And the ticket buys you an experience of a pretend bus
with the principal where you get to watch a training video and practice it. It's an old model of teaching, teach it, model it, and practice it. So you are teaching kids how to ride the bus under the supervision of the school. So you're connecting the people that they trust and have respect for at the school to that behavior on the bus. So that's that check-in piece. We're going to do some training for our transportation staff. I've got a lead on someone out of actually a great trainer out of Lakeview. I think they have long routes in Lakeview, and so they do some good bus training. I've heard we're going to see if we can bring them into our system and get some training. And then just raising the level of awareness. Joel and I and Stacy and Joel picked up a bunch of donuts and we went out to transportation and just connected with those people and said, we are here to help make the system better. Let's communicate, got their, get their feedback on how it's going, and then incorporated that into the plan. We are, as we have told you, we are implementing Versatrans, which does a better job than we do of tracking who's on that bus and if they're getting off on their, are they on the right bus for their AM drop? Are they on the right bus for their PM drop? So we're just trying to move the Versatran implementation faster. We did the routing piece of it in the fall. It's generally in an implementation, you're doing it in stages, but we're trying to get the tracking piece moved up and get it on there more quickly. The routing times, just been doing some review of that, and people have been, or people who are running the routes are doing writing of some of those routes that are especially long or problematic, and working on the routing times. We have a really good PBIS bus incident and referral process. It, as with everything, sometimes implementation peaks and then tapers off. So we're bringing that back up to really visual. Those bus rules need to be posted and they need to be taught, and you need to be able to refer kids to them when you're working through that process. And then probably one of the great things we're doing is bringing in an external audit of someone who knows transportation, and just to look the system over from top to bottom and say, here's some things you guys are doing well, but here's some things you could improve. And then we'll just keep working on this. I think we've kind of calmed the fire down, but we want to be sure we improve the system. So that's where we're headed with it.
How are we tracking our progress?
Bus referrals, and then of course we will is collecting qualitative data and quantitative, and so we have some check back meetings set, and part of it will be, did we do what we say we're going to do? Have we reduced referrals? Are all kids getting home? When is Versatrans going to be on board? And so some of it's pretty easy to measure, but I think that's a great question, and we are not just squirting some water on it and then walking off. We gotta make this better.
What kind of time frame do you think is reasonable to have a report out to kind of review with a systemic change like this? I think it's useful for us to see, we implemented these things and now it's 6 months later and this is better.
The audit, Jay has been helpful in organizing HR components of it. What do you think, Jay? 6 weeks back?
Yeah, the auditor will be out next week for the first look, so maybe 6 weeks after that to give them a full look.
December board meeting would be a good
Yeah,
target for
and
us.
I can continue to just inform the board informally about, it is great to have the principals come in today and say, guess how many bus tickets we had today? 0. That means that kids are appreciating recess time doing something else besides practicing on the pretend bus.
Are we doing some positive reinforcement?
Tons. There's a ton of positive, like I think we got that nailed.
Good.
We were good on that. I think we just weren't doing the teach model practice component well enough.
So how many bus drivers are we short?
It depends on the day, but we think that, we have, how many do we have in the pipeline?
We've got 1 in training, 2 in training, and just picking up 3 more right now.
Okay, so in the last 2 board meetings, we have approved 2 firings and no hirings
On the buses?
on bus drivers. That's going back to the consent agenda
Yeah,
where
totally.
we lost a driver and there's no one hired and we lost another one this month.
So I'm really glad you brought that up, because one of the things we did that's not on this plan is we shifted the posting, setting the hiring process to Jay, because when Michelle's on the bus driving, that's one of the barriers we were running into. She can call and leave a message, but she's not there to follow the process all the way through. So Jay has picked that up, and that's why I'm asking Jay where we're at in the process. But we actually said we need to overhire, and once we get our contract settled, I believe that we'll be really competitive, and I think that will help us get that. We would like to be a couple drivers overhired so that we have trip people, and then also it never hurts to have somebody ride the bus, learn another route, meet those kids, build relationships, and then if somebody needs to be pulled off, you're always in rotation. We have 2 out on FEMLA right now. So some of these are perfect storm things that occurred at the beginning of the
Okay,
year.
so I think last week we didn't have a bus driver up here, right?
Yes,
I've been contacted by 2 different groups that were out looking for, hey, Doug, can you drive a school bus?
yes.
No. And because there were activity buses that we couldn't supply a driver to. I think even our football team had to take a combinate to a game a couple of weeks ago. They had to take type 20s and then one of the coaches drive a pickup. And I'm just sitting here going, we have got to figure out how to hire drivers. We've got to figure out how to retain drivers. And sometimes that means we're going to have to figure out how to.
So Doug, not to just be too transparent, but we're trying to work with drivers to make sure they can keep those jobs. And we are trying to hire, and we are not the only district that's really struggling with drivers.
I
And
know
so we are trying to do some things that raise the skids on this.
Are we still doing the thing where we paired with maintenance to try to
Oh,
get
yeah.
more hours
Mhm.
for folks?
And nutrition, or, and
Last year, we were supplementing with a charter company. Are we using the charter company still?
every time we can get one.
They don't have availability because of their driver situation.
I mean, if you go anywhere and you see a bus driving around, it says we're hiring, a city bus, a FedEx driver, it's one of the jobs that's really, that people are having a hard time filling them. And I think, I'm kind of joking about what it's like to do a bus. It's a hard job. And so we are trying to show those people that we are here to support you. We don't expect you to, manage behavior crisis and try to drive this bus. And we want to make sure they know we got your back, and we're there trying to solve the problems. And if you get any creative ideas, I think Jay's gonna go around some up.
And you have to meet all the criteria of a state school employee.
Yes.
And there's a significant, that training pipeline. I mean, I believe it's up to
It's
6
long.
weeks of various licensures and tests. So it's tough, but it has to be a top priority. And I think, Doug, your question hits at the core. I think a lot of these issues are like restaurants. A lot of it is staffing
But
shortage.
the situation is that I've sat here for 2 weeks and you say, okay, well, we lost another bus driver. And now you come back a month later and you say, we lost another bus driver. But there's nothing on the sheet that says we're hiring, right? And then when we ask, we say, well, Jay's working on 3 of them, but somehow Jay's aren't making it on this piece of paper.
Yeah, those,
We got to get them on the piece of paper.
yeah, I think that 6-week pipeline is
Yeah, that's
probably why you're seeing that lag. Because I know there's, I think Jay mentioned 2
I'm
in
not
there.
seeing a lag. I'm not seeing anything on the hiring side,
All right,
right?
point taken. I mean, we need more.
Are we paying them while they train or are we?
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, we
Well,
pay
then how can they be training if we aren't hired?
them.
And then why are they on the paper?
So
we
so
have to
Jays
have-
aren't even on this paper, or on this paper already last summer?
HR, so as they're going through that pipeline training, they on the,
Have they been hired? They've been on here last summer.
So I have to go back and look to see which ones. I honestly don't know off my head on those. There's 2 that are in training right now, so they have to get a CDL license through school. And then they have to go through that. We've got some that haven't been met or got on the consent agenda yet, because we're still in that process of onboarding them to bring them on. So once they pass all of the requirements they have to do, so through the Department of Transportation, you have to pass drug tests, background checks. All of those have to go through fingerprinting, everything that goes with the school employee. As those go through, sometimes that's where we don't feel like consent until they pass all those metrics.
But if we're paying them, they've gone on consent.
So we have 3 right now that have not gone on consent agenda yet because they're still in that fingerprinting.
Do we
process.
pay them? Do we pay them for the training?
We pay
So they
them.
have not gone into the training process.
Correct.
What percentage of folks fall out from the, hey, we'd like to go forward with you, to the getting on a physical bus and driving kids?
Most who come in and interview make it through that process. There are some that don't, but most do.
So we keep it posted all the time, and anytime one comes in, we call. We lose a lot of them right there. They don't return the call, or they just say, oh, never mind, I'm not interested. We lose a lot right there. We had one that chose FedEx over us. Just, I mean, every app that comes in, well, Tina watches it, and it's hard to get apps even. And, you know, we've had some.
So we don't have any entry. So basically where we're standing right now is we've got 3 that are doing the 2 or 3 that are doing the preliminaries. We have none in the driver's training portion. We have none in the driver's training portion.
We have 2 in the driver's training.
They can't drive school bus, but are soon going to be able to.
They're in school, to the CDL school, to be able to drive. So they have to get their CDL license, then they have to do a bus certificate, and then they can start ride-alongs, and then they can drive.
Okay, and the CDL certificate is 40 hours of training. And we pay for that. So when did those 2 get online?
I'd have to look back, but I know.
Because I'm just wondering, if I don't see any for last month's consent agenda or this month's consent agenda, then that puts us back into August. So these are the ones we hired them in August and they're now driving on a 40-hour training process to get a CDL.
I think the best, Michelle Williams has the most details and could speak more specifically, so that we're getting you the right information. And maybe we can push this up
So-
to next month.
Yeah, well, I'd say solve it.
Yeah.
And don't tell us about how you did it. But if you can't solve it, we probably need to talk to Michelle.
I like it. Yeah. we'll
I
bring
mean,
some-
fair enough, right? It's a big problem.
It's a I'm telling you, it's a problem statewide.
Yeah,
Right.
it's national.
Well, I don't know about national, but every time I read an OSBA news deal, you can find where somebody's having trouble hiring.
It's national.
Yeah, it's,
But we have the belief, we have the strict, one of the rules is they have to have the vaccination. Right, in Oregon,
Or exemption.
or an exemption.
or have
Exception.
applied for a religious or. Okay.
Anything else about buses before we move on?
No, Because
Are you, Dr. Johnson has some updates.
Okay, so, not a ton of updates, but, let's see, the first one is the housing, and there's really nothing else. Our next event is having a meeting with a woman who is representing CORE. So,
Who is
that's all
CORE?
scheduled. It is the nonprofit that manages the, housing, workforce housing for, I guess they manage it through Neighbor Impact, because she's the one. Housing work, sorry, I'm sorry, I forgot. Yes.
They're the ones
housing
doing
work.
the project in Bend now
Yes,
and looking at doing projects.
so we have that scheduled for her to come out. We, also, the people that will be meeting in, during that time will be the city, the county, the school district. And CORE, so we have the right people at the table. We just have to move it forward to the next phase, which is hopefully finding the right piece of property. And then, any questions on that one that
Have we surveyed our staff at all?
no, CORE does that
Okay.
work, so that, when we meet with them, they actually do that consulting part. They did get a grant from, I think I mentioned this to the board, that they got a grant from the Roundhouse Foundation to pay for the study, so we're good to go on that part. Okay. And then the childcare update, the grant has, the RFP is open, and Anna and Caroline have worked together to put together some scenarios, and we have a meeting tomorrow morning to decide which scenario we want to go for. And as Anna said, she could run any number of scenarios, so we'll see what this looks like tomorrow morning. We'll make the deadline for the grant, we'll decide how much to put in there, and I'll get back to you as it moves forward.
When is that deadline?
Do you remember the deadline?
It's squishy, but we're shooting for next Friday.
Okay.
But that whole, yeah, as you know, that process has been, squishy is a great word. And they've been really interested in working with us, so I think that's a real advantage.
Well, more to come on that then. Anything else?
No, you love the next report.
Division 22, Stacy Smith.
Hello.
Are we compliant, sir?
75%.
That'd be more than that.
Odie put together a PowerPoint that I thought gave a little background that might be beneficial. It's going to be a fairly quick presentation. Go ahead and do the next one for me, Joel. So Division 22 are the ORSs and OARs that govern what is a standard school district. So it's basically the floor requirements that all schools are required to do in order to be considered standard. And I thought you might get a kick out of this. Secretary of State, if you ever went online, the 581 piece is the chapter. The division is 22, and we've kind of shortened this conversation to division 22 requirements. And then the actual rule number, which varies by rule, obviously. And the state says, hey, you know, we want all of these in place for every school district in the state of Oregon, because it makes sure that we're teaching the things that we need to teach and that our schools are safe. And that's the floor. Obviously, you can do more. We want you to do more. And if you happen to be out of compliance, it's not a gotcha. It's we're here to provide technical support, ideas and suggestions. A lot of them are attached to costs. And so they're trying to be as helpful to school districts as possible. But it's good to have school districts examine themselves and their systems to make sure the things that we need to be doing for our kids are being done. Joel, will you, thank you. So this is kind of what I just stated. It makes sure that we are committed to a high quality educational experience. The Division 22 standards are the floor. And this process of ensuring that these are in place helps us if we are in need of technical assistance. Now, all of the rules, and you'll see in the right-hand corner, there are over 50 of them, fall into 4 categories: teaching and learning, health and safety, district performance, and accountability. Okay, Joel. Here are some examples, Joel, of teaching and learning. There you've got required instructional time, human sexuality education, comprehensive school counseling. On the other side of the same category, the administration of assessments, identification of tag students, and credit options. When we get to health and safety, we've got our Every Student Belongs, suicide prevention, school sport concussion protocols, and then in district performance and accountability, we've got to have policies on how people can complain. And then human resources and staffing, we've got policies around fingerprinting, background checks, and teacher training related to dyslexia, which we'll talk about in just a minute. So for, could you go back one? No, one more forward, thanks. This is a reminder that we're looking back a year. And sometimes it gets confusing if we think about, because things change. For example, well, I won't say anything yet because it comes up in a minute. But there are different requirements for different years. If you remember the COVID year, there were only 17 compliance check boxes for Division 22. Now we have over 50. All right. So these are the changes that were in place for the 21-22 school year that you guys have talked about. They gave us an opportunity to waive some of the assessment of essential skills. Our board wisely said, no, we'll continue to maintain our requirements for the assessment of essential skills. And obviously we didn't do the kindergarten assessment. Cool, thank you. There are 3 steps when it comes to this process as far as OD is concerned. We're taking care of the first bullet tonight. You are receiving an oral report at a board meeting that talks about the Division 22 standards. Next, after this report, we've got a template that will go online. In fact, you're looking at the template now. It was in your board packet. That will go on the district website. And then we will submit this no later than November 15th to OD for examination. Last year, for the 2021, we reported we were out of compliance in 4 areas: prevention education, drugs and alcohol, human sexuality education, PE minute requirements, and teacher training related to dyslexia. We have since fixed 3 of those 4. The one that remains is PE instructional minutes at the middle school level. So the pieces that were missing in 2 of them were comprehensive plans and instructions. Those groups were developed and met and completed that process. And then we needed to train an additional person because Steenspiller and Grizzly Mountain didn't have a dyslexia specialist. Kim Waits has agreed to do that work and has been trained. So 3 of the 4 have been met. And as I said before, our PE minutes for the middle school. Hey, Joel. Looking ahead, these are new. This year, we're not talking about this year, the final bump in PE minute requirements hits the middle school. So now they have to have 225 minutes a week. We've submitted a plan of correction that says we will attempt to budget the necessary FTE and whatever changes in the master schedule to allow us to meet that. There's a possibility there may be a change in the legislation that maybe walks back those PE minute requirements. So we're kind of seeing what happens there. Joel has taken care of the operational plans in the past. They're going to come up with a template. They're going to tell you how it needs to be submitted in the future. Joel does such a wonderful job on this. It'll be a piece of cake for him. The agreements entered into with voluntary organizations means that if we're hosting, let's say a club sport, there's some elements that they need to follow, and we're responsible to supervise and make sure those things happen. Jay Weeks and Rob Bonner know about this, have been in conversation. I think we may have a policy. I'm looking for Jay. He's not here.
It's on the.
Is it on this batch?
Yes.
You have a policy in this batch that will be one of the steps to meet this for the future. There are some changes in the tag program around identification, the posting of a plan, most of which have already been occurring anyway. Those will be taken care of easily. Same as identification, most of those changes have already occurred in our district. We're keeping up to speed. Cool. And that's it.
So on the PE requirement at the middle school, for the 22-23 school year, we don't have the problem solved today.
Good.
We are hoping that the legislature will do something about it, but they're not even going to start meeting until February.
Our
So-
corrective action plan states that we have our plan geared towards meeting the requirement in the 23-24 school.
Okay.
So you will bring to us a budget with that covered. The additional.
Unless the
Instructor at the middle school.
legislature intervenes and walks it back and we don't need to hire.
And part of what that will mean is we have to change the school day for the middle school. 45 minutes a day is a lot of people. It's an additional 45 minutes.
So is that rule around the amount of time you have scheduled or the amount of time individual students are achieving?
Schedule. If we were a 4-day-a-week district, they allow less because you have one less day. But we don't have any control whether they.
So what I'm wondering is the high school has done an amazing job with allowing students to get credit for the time they spend in athletics.
Right.
And given the very large amount of students we have participating in athletics in middle school, yay, you guys, that's wonderful. Can we use some of that and harness it for credit in order to help mitigate this? I'm not sure how that would work, but
We can look into
That's
that.
my
My
question
question
kids
is,
with
I
a
don't
lot
know
of
the answer.
time spent in athletics on the field, which would be easier than adding 45 minutes a day.
So I don't know the percentage of school districts that haven't met this, but it's exactly the reason that we're looking at is it changes your schedule and your bus
Right.
schedule.
It was a
and blah, blah,
stupid
blah.
idea when they adopted it.
Yeah,
It's still a
and,
stupid idea.
But it's time that we either address it,
Yeah. it's not-
right? We either address it next year, or we find a way around it, or whatever we're gonna do, but let's quit being substandard and not address it.
It's a good question. We will find out.
One of the ways that school districts have gone through the rule is to call something you're doing, something else you're doing. For example, health, or have each teacher, 1 to 5 minutes a period, talk about health. And then you can therefore get your 45 minutes. So there's some skinny ways like that to address it, but given COVID and we're hoping.
Yeah, hope is not a strategy.
Yeah. But Peter Courtney is retiring. And so he is now retired.
Well, that's true.
And so the word in some circles is that this is short-lived, but see. It was a matter of wait it out.
Wait it out.
We waited and waited out.
Well, it was actually passed
I'm not
a
saying it's
long
not
time
bad,
ago, and it was,
They
yeah,
kept
put
moving
off
it
and put off and put off and put off and.
You need a motion to accept this, your cover sheet says. Looking for a motion.
There's not actually, there's
action.
not
It just has
actually
to be
an action
presented,
on
right?
this, there just has to be documentation that we reviewed it verbally with the board. In other words, you can't put it in consent agenda anymore.
Thank you, Stacey.
My pleasure.
Did we
about to leave and yeah.
Okay, since we're in Paulina, I thought I'd talk a little bit about some of the upcoming things that we're gonna be trying to do here at this school first. So if you had a chance to actually go out back and look out back today, the playground area out there is asphalt and it severely needs to be replaced. So my hope is that we'll try and actually get bids in over the course of the winter. And then next summer, we'll come in and we'll pave that and make that a nice, level, smoother place for the kids to play. One of the other issues that we have is the domestic water pump. We run 2 pumps, so we have 1 pump in the shop right now that's ready to go. And anytime the pump that's here fails, we run out here and swap pumps. It's starting to become a bigger problem, so we're gonna upgrade that whole system. We're gonna put a new pump in. We've got to do some of the work coming up. We've got to trench a line for the electricity for it and everything else, but we're gonna put a new line in, put a new pump in, and I hope to do that. We'll probably be starting that in the next few weeks. One of the other water-related things that we have is there is actually a section of grass out here that doesn't get add some sprinklers out there, so we're watering all the grass that's out there on the timed irrigation system. And then there is a new oven coming for this building. It is not the one that's out here. It's an electric one because we have issues with gas and that hood doesn't manage to suck all the propane, the the fumes from the burnt propane. It doesn't always tend to pull all those fumes out. So we're gonna go with a nicer electric oven. And that should be, the reason the other one's here is because the freight company got them mixed up and that one actually goes in Pioneer High School. So it's being stored here right at the moment until we get into Pioneer, into the kitchen area.
They didn't install or bring a fire pump out here.
No,
Right.
the fire pump is over there though. I have good news about the fire pump. So it's scheduled to be set on the pad Wednesday. And then we'll get all the power and everything for it hooked up on Thursday. Because we have to kill all the power again to hook it up. Because there's no, it has to go, it's directly hooked into the transformer. So that's taking place this week. We did a punch list inspection on the building last week. So Modern Buildings back over and they were working, they had 4 or 5 guys over the day just working on the punch list stuff to get all that finished. Because the building's essentially, it's pretty much done. We're gonna try and do some of the prep inside the classrooms ourselves. So we're planning to try and move some furniture in, get some of the rooms clean to the point to where what our standard is, what the contractor standard is. So we want to get those clean, start moving some furniture in there. Right now, there's a lot of site work going on. So SMAP's working on trying to get, they've got all the vaults over there and they're trying to get everything built up to grade because they're planning to start paving towards the end of this week.
I'm sorry, did you say balsa wood?
No, they're gonna start paving. So
The vault.
the vaults.
Oh, vault.
Yeah, so
Okay.
all the
Sorry.
access areas for all the water and electrical, those are all getting brought up to grade. They passed all the inspections so far. I think the only thing we really have left will be our final inspection. So things are moving along pretty well. They're gonna pour the concrete tomorrow in the front of the building. So everything right along the front door will get poured tomorrow. They were putting forms up today. Natural gas is in, the meter's set, and they were doing they had their HVAC guy over there today, so he was doing commissioning on that system, trying to get the heating and cooling running. And that's pretty much.
So what's our new target date to open it up?
So
Good luck. Leave them
yeah,
on, say it
I
out
am
loud.
still leery to give a date.
Soon.
Yeah, soon.
So tomorrow.
Tomorrow is not gonna happen.
That's not soon.
That's not that soon.
Tuesday.
As soon as we can get in there, I'm worried that something else could go wrong, so I'm not.
We're still 10 days, right?
Yeah.
10
at
days,
least.
2 weeks.
I expect paving to go on next week. And at that point, once it's paved, then we can get in there and actually start putting stuff in there. And I mean, that'll be just about it. As soon as the paving's done, fence has got to go up right after that. And
And then landscaping can happen afterward.
Right.
We'll probably do landscaping, because I'm kind of keeping the landscaping budget as kind of contingency, just in case we get a little bit over budget, then we can kind of cut back on some of the landscaping. I mean, we did that with Crooked River when it was built, or when it was remodeled from the bond. We actually went back and did some landscaping after the fact. So but we're putting like this sleeves for all the water, irrigation stuff. We're putting that all into the parking lot now, so that it's actually in place. So once we get there, we can pull all the wires and all.
At this point, wouldn't it make more sense to just hold the landscaping off until spring anyway?
Yeah, it'll be spring. Most of the landscapers, going into winter, they're probably not as busy as they would be, but trying to get them, the materials might be a little bit tough, but spring will be the best time to actually go in there and actually put that stuff in the ground again.
Yeah, getting anything established. I mean, who knows what kind of winter we're gonna have, but
So the pump out here, is this above ground or submersible?
It's, the pumps, it's a jet pump and it's in that little, if you go out between out where the oil barrel is, there's a little room right there, so it just sits right in there.
So it's above.
so by our next meeting, we should be at one.
At Pioneer?
Yeah.
I hope so.
Hey, Doug said 2 weeks. I'm giving you a month.
I didn't say that. I said 10 days or a little
I
longer.
hope so. We're hustling as hard as we can. We really are. I put pressure on the guys, the SMAP guys all the time, and I try and get them to, it's hard to even get them to give me a schedule. So they'll say, well, it's probably gonna be here, but trying to get a written schedule from them is sometimes tough. And a lot of it has to do with staffing.
Well, and PPNL has not been our friend. Should I have said that on Zoom?
Maybe you just leave it at that. Yeah.
Okay, any more questions for me?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And Olivia, your turn.
Thank you. I have quite a few things to talk about on the finance report, and I kind of want to start midway through and go backwards. I believe I'm projecting my voice, but the owl refused to pick up my voice, so if you can't hear me on the owl, I'm sorry. So I'd like to start. This is to listen to that, so. I got a little note saying. It is hard to hear you. Yeah.
From the owl?
Give it a couple of guests, just say they.
Speak a little deeper.
I'll stand. Maybe that'll help. Okay. Start on page 6, if you would. Page 6 is the standard general fund projection. And normally by September, the picture has started to come into focus more. But keep in mind this year, we still have an unsettled classified contract. So we have classified staff who have not moved on any kind of a wage change at all at this point. Payroll system, as it helps me project the whole year's worth of expenses, is using wages that are not correct. So hopefully by next month. So I don't really want to talk too much on this unless anybody has any questions. Okay, so then going backwards a little bit, forward. Page 7. You may have noticed that the state grants column is negative, and it actually started out with a beginning fund balance that was negative. There are several grants in the state grants column kind of combined, but one of the biggest ones is our summer school grant, and that was a very large grant. So that we will not actually claim that until late October or early November. So that's why that has a very large negative fund balance. There's just a lot of inputs that goes into that summer school grant claim, and some of them we don't even have yet. So like the sub bill doesn't come until a month and a half later, and the credit card bill doesn't get posted. So anyway, it's just want to let you know that that's why that's there.
And it's a reimbursement.
It's
So
a
we spend the
reimbursement.
money and then
So
claim it.
part of it will come from a state grant, and then part of it will come from ESSER 3 for unfinished learning. Okay, now going backward a little bit to page 5, you may have noticed in my narrative that the PERS rates will be increasing July 1st of 2023. This is fairly recent news. It's a pretty substantial increase, with tier 1 going from tier 2 going from 5.65 to 8.25, and OPSERV going from 2.54 to 5.41. These are percentages that I'm talking about. I'm estimating that right now to be about $1 million a year in increased cost. We have seen this coming for a while, so we tried to plan ahead, and as we've made financial decisions to be ready for this, but I can't guarantee it's not going to be bumpy. Just be ready for a non-event or bad news. I'm not sure yet.
What percentage of our staff is still tier 1, tier 2?
I'm going to say between 30 and 40. And decreasing. Any other questions on that?
Question for Patty. Is
Yeah.
OSBA, I mean, this must be happening statewide. Is OSBA looking at some sort of adjustment of the state school fund to offset this for us in the next session?
I haven't heard discussion specifically about PERS. Certainly, part of the OSBA legislative philosophy is not, is backfilling any additional costs and trying to control costs. But I'll ask what they
It
know
would be
about
great
what's
to
going
know
on
if
with
they-
PERS.
I mean, it's a good talking point.
Yeah.
All right, now we need to talk
Oh,
about.
Anna, before we get off of this, so these rates change all the time.
Every 2 years.
And usually we look at other districts and we laugh because it's so horrible for them and so great for us because of our side account. But now our side account is winding down, right? So it's not going to help us this much.
It still helps us. When it's gone, it won't help us. 2038, I believe, is the year.
Okay.
But part of there are several factors that can hurt you. And one of the biggest ones impacted us is the increase in your payroll cost. So your total payroll cost, when it increases substantially, when they look at the side account, they are estimating how long that side account is going to last. And when you have a jump in your payroll costs, when you add a lot of staff, like we did with 12 teachers at Steens Pillar, the calculations make it look like our side account's going to go away a lot faster. So that's why our rates then have to increase in order to adjust, compensate for that.
What kind of assumptions do they build into that, if you know? So like we've hired 12 new teachers. Most of them are going to be OPSERV teachers. So do we give them that information? Do they build that in, or do they just say your total payroll is X and, so it's going to adjust?
PERS hires an actuary and they use a lot of assumptions. And I think their report on that is probably 20 to 50 pages. So there's a lot that they use. I can give you the details on how to see all of that, but it'd be way too much for us to go into.
Yeah, I prefer you did.
I mean, they're.
Yeah, I'm not
talking
that
about,
interested, but
about, age and how long people will live and how long their spouses will live and Social Security indexes and all kinds of.
well, if they're factoring in age, then I would imagine they're plugging them into the appropriate category.
Yes, and they do separate analyses for OPSERV versus tier 1, tier 2 throughout their whole analysis.
Thank you.
Sure. All right, school bond. We attempted a bond measure in May.
At that time, we estimated that we could issue $66 million in bonds and keep the tax rate relatively level. It would increase about 10 cents versus dropping, how much it was going to drop. But the financial markets have changed a lot since that time. So I've been talking with Edward Sandler, who is our expert consultant on this. And with today's market, we could only issue about $55 million with the same outcome. So that's how much things have changed. That may mean that timing right now doesn't support a larger bond. We may want to start looking at a smaller bond because we still have some pressing needs like boilers and roofs. And with the thought that maybe we could go out to the voters again with a smaller amount. Issue bonds, that's the district going into debt and asking taxpayers to pay for that debt. The market and get more money, because you can do both with a bond. You can go to the market and actually generate more money than the par value of the bonds, and that's called a premium. Or you can actually get a discount and get less money than what you're issuing, which is what these analyses are showing right now. So anyway, so I had them do an analysis for $10 million over 25 years and $25 million over 25 years. And the current prediction on that would be that, let's say we don't do any bonds, any additional bonds. We have the one bond that is, it's currently about 92 cents. It's going to drop down to 74 cents and continue dropping every year to about 36 cents. That's a drop of between 18 cents and 56 cents.
Yeah, it'll be 72, around 72 cents when it comes out next month.
Okay.
Or late this month.
And that's per $1,000 of assessed value. So for the $10 million bond, the tax impact would be an increase of between 7 cents and 17 cents per year instead of dropping. And for the $25 million bond, it would be an increase of 17 cents to 55 cents increase per year instead of dropping. Either way, it wouldn't exceed 92 cents. So really, I think there's probably more discussion that needs to be had about this. It's not on the agenda to do any kind of decision or action. So you may want to consider a work session to talk about this some more if we do want to still consider a May measure election.
And I would prefer to have a facilities committee meeting prior to a board work session.
Okay, so that can be our first follow-up. Any questions or?
You have a facilities committee meeting Thursday. You want me to put that on the agenda or wait 2 weeks?
I was believing that the group that I had.
You mean the facilities committee, the construction committee, or the
long-term group?
The enrollment projections is next.
If they can hear me better, I was in choir in high school and I was told to stand, but I will not sing the financial. Every year I present to you some projections on enrollment that go 10 years out. So every year I update the history, and then it does some projections, a 2% increase, 2% decrease, a 1% increase, and then it looks at the trend or average. So really, I don't see any issues that are standing out for us as far as building capacity goes. One thing I will note is on the back page where there's Pioneer High School, current capacity says 120. But that has not been updated for the new building. So it's one thing to look at the classrooms and say there are 5 classrooms. You could theoretically put 30 students in there. But then we also need to watch throughout the year and see what does it look like in the common space and what does the schedule look like? So by next year, that number may look different as far as the capacity goes in that dotted red line. Questions?
So when I reviewed this earlier, I was just curious as to how these projections stacked up against the Portland State projections for the long term. So I actually printed them out and brought them for everybody tonight because they were very interesting. They show that by 2030, we would be looking at a 2.5% growth in the total population. So we are, considering the time between now and then, that we're in a very comfortable position, whether you look at those or you look at Anna's projections.
And I will tell you that I looked at these from my work on facilities. I eliminated 2020 and 2021 and drew the lines, and basically they all end up flattening out. Point to where we're pretty good in elementary. Now the thing we've got to realize is that the lead time for a facility it used to be that if you passed a bond, you could have a building in 2 years. I'm not sure that if you passed a bond now that you could have it in 3. Maybe 3 years of 2 weeks, but the 2 weeks are going to be continually 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. But it's completely different than it was when we built the environment. The building environment is completely different than when we built. And Leland and I have had this conversation. I think I've had it with Anna, but Baker City passed a bond for a cafeteria. They figured at the time that the cafeteria would cost them $400 a square foot. They ended up with a $4 million bond, a $4 million matching awesome grant, and $1.5 million local funds that were going to build this, pay for this $9.5 million parking lot, cafeteria attached to the middle school, remodel part of the middle school project. And they used 8.5 of it to build the cafeteria at $600 or $1,800 a square foot.
Oh.
County furniture.
For a cafeteria?
Yeah.
Wow.
Cafeteria and kitchen. Kitchens are expensive. And equipment in a cafeteria is expensive. But 8.5 million, 1,800, about a little over 1,800 a square foot. So we'll be careful what we recommend.
Anything else in the enrollment? We can talk about the bus purchases, Anna.
We have a request for action on the purchase of 2 buses. This is a $363,223 quote that we have. Buses are expensive, but we have planned 10 years to continue to be able to purchase buses, continue to refresh our fleet. So the reason it comes is in addition to our regular purchasing.
What are the merits of a conventional bus versus a rear engine bus?
Okay, so I'm a finance person.
I understand.
But I do know that the rear engine buses have certain applications. So long haul, like over mountains, to go to Portland or to go to, Salem or, over there. That's when we often buy a rear engine bus, but I think that they are less fuel efficient. And then the other bus that we're calling conventional is the propane. That's something that we save a lot of money on fuel with propane. So those are usually route buses. I did pretty good with you.
Yeah,
You did, very good. Madam Chair.
We really
It's
put
okay.
our transportation manager through the ringer on these, so.
And they both do have AC, which is gonna
Yes.
Yeah.
do the huge come summer school.
Well, I just wondered because they both have the same capacity why we would get one of each instead of
It's
just.
probably more related to the transmission and gearing pieces of it. Right, so one's geared more for long haul over the road, lower RPMs, and one's more for starting and stopping on a bus route.
Okay, thank you.
Now that's a little bit of wild
Wild West guess, huh?
Just a little bit.
I move to approve the purchase of 2 school buses in the amount of $363,223.
Any other discussion?
Question, Anna, we've got that much in the reserve?
Yes.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Are unanimous? Okay. Now we move to the pile of policies. Do either of our policy people have anything to report about all of this work?
Sure. Can I, is it start, okay, if I start, I'd just like to go over how our policies come to us and what our process has been in the last year and a half. So a year and a half ago, we contracted with OSBA, who has a policy staff and writes most of the policies for the state of Oregon, for all the districts in the state of Oregon. And they basically went through our policies and sent us a completely reviewed policy book, which was adopted, what, 2 years ago, Scott? Roughly. And then as policies change based on the legislature's action or requirements from any other governing body, then within a period of probably 6 months, we receive an updated policy from OSBA that has been reviewed by their lawyers and is sent to us. When we receive those policies, Heather looks them over and basically says, oh, this involves something that is in Mr. Smith's area, or this is a safety item, it would go to Leland, or this is something, they got a graph on here, we'll go have Dr. We'll have
There's
Dr.
Excel
Hawk
involved.
look at the graph or whatever, and then they come back with a recommended to our policy group that says accept as is, make these changes. And we very seldom will, I mean, the legal notifications or anything else, those are all put on there by OSBA's attorneys. Patty and I, neither one have, I think, have ever changed one of those legal notifications down at the bottom as far as the footprints, but we have changed the policies. So when you look at the policies, you're going to see, when you see this one for the superintendent's contract, the blue is a recommended insert and the red is a recommended delete, and that's to bring it into compliance with the state state law that was enacted, I think, in July. Sometimes if they do a emergency act, I don't think OSBA attorneys do emergencies. And so we will be out of compliance until we adopt the policy.
Yeah, they stay pretty tight on the schedules. And I would say patients from staff come back with anything that we think is possibly questionable. We'll address it with our attorneys. We'll go back to the OSBA policy group. Also, when we get the policies from OSBA, sometimes there's optional language and our staff decides whether it's going to be, will or, who's going to be in charge of those things. And then once we go through that process, Doug and I are the designated policy committee, and we read through all of these. Neither of us are attorneys, but we read through it from a board lens, and often have discussion and changes and questions, and sometimes we'll pull one out because we need to do some more research on it, and then we bring them to the board. So there is, the superintendent isn't making policy, the staff is not making policy, the board is making policy with the input of all of the people who should have input on that, including implementing it. And it is reviewed by attorneys as well as professional policy folks.
And some of it is crazy. Why are they making us do this? Change apostrophes to colons type
Sometimes.
stuff. And sometimes it is significant. And there are times when Patty and I have made changes because we don't think it fits our Cook County environment.
But whatever changes we make are still in compliance with the law.
Right, so yeah, they've got their little goodies in here. We take them out and put something in that is more Cook County-ish, and it solves the problem without us saying what they wanted us to say.
And can you speak briefly to how the process for ARs work, when those come into play, when they don't?
So originally, when I came on the board, ARs did not require the approval of the board. We would review them, but not approve them. Then during the policy rewrite, because when you adopt every new policy, suddenly every AR had to be adopted or rewritten as well. And so we were receiving ARs from OSBA that were recommended ARs instead of ARs that were developed in Cook County. And so we said at the time that we would approve ARs at the same time we approved the policy. Now, I don't think anybody is stuck to that in a day-to-day operation. But for when you look at, and when Patty and I started this, we reapproved, the board reapproved every policy in the policy manual, which was about that much paper. And we reread every item in every page of every policy and every AR. And so it was important that those ARs be readopted. Now, today, I don't think it's as important that they be readopted, but I think it's important that the board is familiar with them.
Well, the ARs are about how we implement the policy. And so they really go hand in hand. And so when we were policies without seeing how it was going to be implemented, that was a problem. When we were trying to look at ARs without seeing the policy that they went with, that was a problem. So that's why we decided to tie them together.
The practice has been that every AR comes to the board along with the associated policy.
Correct.
And the board has a chance to review them and comment if they think they need to be changed. So that's what we've been doing for
a long time.
Since we did the last big policy, right, for sure.
And Heather, do you have a concept? I wouldn't even guess how many policies we have.
Oh, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean,
It's significant.
probably 150 or more.
Oh, I would say probably.
Yeah, so, oh, I don't know, it's 1,000.
I think
Yeah, but there's a bunch, and it does happen sometimes that they lose sync. I mean, there aren't too many policies where one policy relies on another policy, but that does happen. And especially when we deal with them in a batch, it's hard to make sure that we tie those together, but anytime that we find that there's a problem with that, we go back and try to fix it. Because Doug and I do that. If we have a policy, we follow it. And if we have a different way of doing things, then we need to bring them into alignment one way or the other. And so we're committed to doing that whenever we find that to be an issue.
So before this board and before I was here, there was a process where the OSBA would send like these need to be updated, a section that needs to be updated. And the board was trying to do them section by section. And then when Scott was chair, we just decided there's some in here that were 1994 and that we just need to probably do the whole thing. So we paid a significant amount of money and had their fleet of attorneys work on it. And I know the board spent days.
Yeah.
I mean,
Over months.
yeah, working on it. So it's much better than
In
it's.
2 weeks.
much better than it's ever been.
I think it's also worth noting that the policies come from the OSBA in two forms, required policies and recommended policies. Required meaning that some statute changed, and you have to do this with this language. Required meaning, or recommended meaning, you may or may not. And this board has turned down policies in the past because it just didn't like them. So it's not automatic that OSBA writes our policies. If it's statutory, it's an argument.
And I think our philosophy is to not have policy that we don't need. You know, if they recommend a policy and it's useful to us, then we'll do it, but we don't do it just to do it.
Any other comments, questions, actions?
Just one, can we not adopt them as a group? I know everybody probably wants to do that, but I have questions on several of these and I want a chance to talk about them.
Want to just go for it, Scott, and
Oh, sure.
pull out?
You want to do all of them at once? You want me to do all of them at once? Okay, 8.1.3 superintendent's contract. The interpretation question on that one. So there's a footnote in there that says the term superintendent includes the interim superintendent. And then the last section of it says that for a period of 1 year after termination of the contract, the superintendent may not use property owned by the district or public charter school in a manner other than the manner permitted for the general public. So does that mean that if we hire Stacy as an interim, the next time Sarah decides to go on and become the Washington DC superintendent, we can't bring him back into his role for 1 year after he leaves because he couldn't use any district property?
No.
Well, that's how I read it. If an interim superintendent can't use property for 1 year, except as it would be permitted to the general public, and we don't let the general public come and use property, then why does that interpretation not follow?
I do know where this came from is because the superintendent or interim superintendent could use, once they were out of the role, could use district property for their own benefit.
So they could go to Leland Shop, get a welder and go weld.
Or drive the
Use the
school
gym.
van around as their personal car, or sell the van on Craigslist or whatever. I know it was to protect the school district.
I mean, I understand that's what was intended. The language is more prescriptive, I think, than what it actually, maybe what the intention was.
So that goes down to electronic computer.
Right.
I think
electronic
that's a lot of
devices.
it too, like if they want to take their own computer from that office to another office, or
Well, but if you read the paragraph above it, in context, it's saying that the employment contract, if it includes a mutually agreed to termination without cause provision by the board, will include a 12-month notice of termination for such problems. Then it's referring to for that 12 months, because you have to pay that superintendent now 12 months, regardless of when if we were not happy and we wanted to get rid of Sarah tomorrow, we have to pay her for a minimum of 12 months. And during that period of time, Sarah cannot use any of our property. But we're going to be paying her wages.
So
during
if
that
we
period
hire
of time.
Stacy, Joel, whoever, as interim superintendent, then at the end of their
If they're
interim,
terminated.
well, terminated doesn't mean fired. Terminated means employment terminates,
That job terminates.
which could be at will or otherwise.
Well, but this is termination without cause.
Because it's specific to that provision above it.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of this relates
It's
to
gonna get
new.
really complicated to figure this all. I wish they had put interims in there. All right,
Well,
so
we can pull it and I can go back and ask them about it.
I'd like more clarification about exactly what it means, because I don't want to end up accidentally losing somebody. Especially the interim stuff. The superintendent piece, I understand. That whole interim piece really complicates the whole thing. That's the idea behind the interim. The short term. The next one I wanted to ask about was 8.113. I may understand that now better than I did before, based on Stacy's presentation, but I'm still trying to understand this whole policy and why it is even necessary, the one on interscholastics. Because this whole reference to a voluntary organization and all that just feels like, I don't know, some sort of aggressive overkill.
No, I think the issue was that it made specific reference to OSAA, but it applies to other organizations as well.
Such as Lacrosse Association, the Skiing Association, the Oregon High School Rodeo Association. There are a lot of sports now that are not being supported by OSAA that have started. And so what they're trying to do is to remove OSAA's name out of there and use something else.
To cover up all that.
And is this a recommended or required policy?
It is
now
required.
It was recommended in the past, it's now required.
So all this stuff in here about the organization has to be able to do all this various stuff is required in a statute somewhere or a rule? Where's it coming from?
Yeah, probably the updates to Title IX.
So that's a reinterpretation of Title IX?
Well, possibly.
So that's the 2018 non-discrimination on basis of sex in education in Title IX, and then 34 CFR Part 106 that was a ruling, that's in a ruling in Montgomery versus the Board of Education.
So all this language is coming out of. Amazing how many people want to run something as simple as student sports. Okay, the last one was a question about 8.1.14, and this is on page 2 of that policy. I see toward the bottom in red, the number 1, where we are striking to receive a diploma in addition to credit requirements, the student must demonstrate proficiency in essential skills of reading, writing, and applying mathematics in a variety of settings. Why would we strike that line? I understand the essential skills test is gone. Perhaps we want to strike the reference to essential skills or lowercase it, but I still think a district requiring proficiency in reading, writing, and applying mathematics in a variety of settings is a reasonable expectation of what a school is supposed to do.
Again, as you will see, essential skills is in caps, and the purpose of this legislative update on this memo was to remove any reference to essential skills because the state no longer offers or recognizes that test.
Right. The state doesn't, but this board adopted very specific language. They didn't want to keep the proficiency requirement of those 4 subjects.
Which we did, I thought we
It's in
did.
footnote 6. It's still on there, on that same page. Footnote 6 says notwithstanding the
down at the very
22
bottom.
changes, we're still requiring students to demonstrate grade level proficiency in reading, writing, math through a variety of
8.1.14.
But we could leave both of these. We could leave that language in there and just lowercase essential skills. Could we not?
What's in more than one spot? So
Well, the rest of them, it makes more sense to take it out. There, I see no reason why that had to come out. And I don't want to vote for it. I mean, it should be in there at least once. So those were my content questions about those 3 policies.
We also know that this policy in particular will be changing somewhat significantly, probably as a result of this coming legislative session, where they're going to apply the results of their survey that they were doing on graduation requirements.
So what if it just doesn't have capital letters for essential skills?
As long as that sentence stays in there and it's lowercase, I'm fine.
and just says 1, 2, 3, 4 right there, and then the whole section on essential skills is removed.
Right.
Well, or just take out in the essential skills and just say demonstrate proficiency
Yeah, that's fine too. Either way.
in reading, writing, and
However
applying
you want to fix
mathematics.
it.
Strike that word, because that's the one that is striking that whole sentence.
I like that. Demonstrate proficiency of.
No, demonstrate proficiency in reading, writing, and
Yeah.
applying. Da-da-da.
Okay, demonstrate proficiency in reading, writing, and applying mathematics in a variety of settings, and then the things that are currently numbered 1, 2, 3 would be 2, 3, 4.
No.
'Cause-
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, you're right. Yeah,
Just like that.
Okay. That sounds good to me.
that's fine.
Okay.
Were those all of your issues?
So Scott, which ones do you want to move forward
I
with?
just want to
Inter?
pull 8.1.3
Okay.
tonight.
So
Get
And
some
I'm fine with
clarification
that.
on the interim.
Right, which is
Superintendent.
CDC. Yeah, to ask about that interim thing.
how about you make the motion, Scott?
Madam Chair, propose to adopt policies 8.1, 2, 3, 4, oops, 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, as presented, or with the exception of the amendment to policy 8.1 or policy IKF. That's not a policy. I think that was it.
Gosh, that's.
So I left out CBC and they put in the amendment for IKF. That's what that did.
Right.
Any second?
Second.
Any more discussion? Okay, let us vote. Who is in favor? Anyone opposed? All right, we are unanimous, all but 8.1.3 will move forward.
We'll try to bring that back next month.
Okay. All right, upcoming dates, we will be.
Reconsideration.
Oh, reconsideration, I apologize. Yes, so we have a formal, am I okay to talk about this? The reconsideration form that we've gotten that is complete enough to move forward with is regarding the sexual education for middle school. It actually isn't about the curriculum itself, it's about the supplemental amaze.org videos. There are 4 of those videos that are actually in use. And so those are the 4 that will be reconsidered, and we have that list for you here of the 4 people from the community. That is our role. The board doesn't involve themselves in reconsiderations, but we do nominate the 4 people to join the committee with the 4 staff members that Dr. Johnson will appoint to that committee. So,
And get to make the final decision.
and they get to make the decision on whether those I did or removed. So any discussion or motions on that?
I move to appoint Josh Reynolds, Mandy McDonald, Kristen Griffin, and Dusty Flegel to the reconsideration committee for the 4 amaze.org videos.
Any second?
Second.
I will just add that all of these are current or former parents of Frick County School kiddos, and I appreciate their willingness to serve on this. Let's go ahead and vote, unless there's any other discussion. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, we are unanimous. They are appointed. All right, so upcoming, we've got the On the Road OSBA in Redmond is coming up next week. Or no, the week after.
October 20th.
October 20th. And
You there?
then our next regular board meeting is at Barnes Butte on November 14th. We've got the OSBA convention in Portland in November.
Yeah, which is actually right before our board meeting.
Sure enough, I don't know why they're in that order. And we will get to see Dr. Johnson formally recognized there for Superintendent of the Year. So that will be an exciting bonus. And then our meetings in December and January are at CCMS and Crooked River. And with that,